Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 I'm Superman. The final decision was that the two capable aerial fighters would be responsible for crippling the giant zombie's legs, and then Mr. Freeze would attack and blast him. Hey, Uncle, what if we don't succeed? Do you have a backup plan? Thea still felt unsure about the idea. After all, the more elaborate a plan, the lower the success rate. One small mistake could bring the entire plan to ruin. Many villains' suicidal plans are grandiose, but so easy to sabotage. Batman was silent for a moment. I'm calling for reinforcements, don't worry. Oh? You're so proud, you still want to call for reinforcements? I'll trust you for now. Seeing Thea silent, Batman went over the plan in his mind, and when he felt it was sound, he calmly issued the order. Selina, take Mr. Freeze and hurry over here. Thea, hold him off for a few more minutes, I'll find suitable terrain, he said as he began to consult the Batplane's data, but he quickly discovered that his password didn't allow him to access his own satellite. Oh, I've checked for you. There's a natural cliff northwest of your area. If we lure it down there and blow it up, we should be able to trap it for a while. The only person who could have found the information so quickly was Felicity Smoke. Regarding her blatant hacking of his own satellite, Batman could only maintain his usual principle with women: feign ignorance. Thea felt the urge to fassip him. Hacking the satellite right in front of the victim like that is a bit too much. She didn't realize Felicity had already removed Bruce's authority without even checking the name, which would have been even more embarrassing. Batman had no complaints about this energetic woman, but, keeping a serious mindset, he still urged Thea to keep the giant zombie safe while he quickly went to investigate. Arriving at the site, he found the terrain suitable. The cliff was about 10 meters high, and the joints were not thick, so his machine guns could easily break it. If he could lure the giant zombie to the bottom of the cliff, he could cause the entire mountain to collapse, and the falling rocks should be able to trap it. Flying the Batplane in a circle, Catwoman confirmed there were no signs of life nearby. Bruce, we're having a problem here. Catwoman's voice was filled with resentment, a hint of a failure. Batman listened silently, then called out to Thea, pull over here. I'll pick up Selina. He gave her a coordinate and sped off into Gotham City. Upon seeing Mr. Freeze, he barely recognized him. His hair was disheveled, and his face bore the marks of slaps, their paleness particularly evident. A group of people were in the cold room, with Catwoman alone, wearing a coat and holding a dagger to his neck. The others were also freezing. Mr. Freeze couldn't survive the cold, leaving the room without a helmet would be fatal. Catwoman didn't dare ask him to wear one, and both sides were stumped by the reality of the situation. But this question was too basic for Batman. He pulled an unknown object from his belt and tossed it into Mr. Freeze's mouth. Plastic bomb. Put on your helmet and follow me. He then handed a remote control to Catwoman. Keep an eye on him. Mr. Freeze rubbed his neck, unsure whether the bomb was real or fake. Reluctantly, he donned his helmet and boarded the Batplane, his sci-fi-looking freeze gun in hand. Once Catwoman boarded the plane, Barbara and Robin realized there was no room left. Batman, uneasy about his apprentice fighting such a fierce zombie, told them to just watch the live feed, as Felicity was controlling the satellite. They quickly rushed to the planned crime scene. Thea was still halfway there, but she had no choice. The zombies were slow, and she had to constantly dodge cars, trees, and other objects they threw. She couldn't move fast enough, so she could only fly slowly. Batman stopped his fighter and, using his grappling gun, reached the side of the cliff and deployed a large ring of bombs. He then tossed a remote control to Catwoman, exchanged glances, and, leaving them both behind, flew off alone to meet Thea. Mr. Freeze's eyelids fluttered as he stared at the two strikingly similar remotes in Catwoman's hands. Big sis, you're not going to get it wrong, are you? You absolutely mustn't make a mistake. Meanwhile, Thea was still swiftly pulling in the monsters. The Sky Eye's attack helicopter had already returned due to lack of fuel. Seeing Batman coming to meet her, she unhesitatingly handed over the entire attack to him. To say she wasn't exhausted would be a lie. With intense concentration, she marched from the center of the city to the south, then circled most of the way around it, lasting several hours. The previous attack had been at night, but now it was daylight. Not only was her energy consumption reduced, but her energy was also less focused. This was after her bloodline awakened, allowing her to absorb some sunlight to restore her strength through her yang veins. Otherwise, she would have given up long ago. Flying quickly to the planned crime scene, Thea saw Mr. Freeze up close for the first time. Their gazes were anything but friendly. While her previous plan of shooting canisters hadn't done much damage to Mr. Freeze, her armor and weapons had been completely destroyed. This time, he was wearing only older models. He wasn't afraid of the frostbite caused by his unique physique, but the effects of freezing were inevitable. While ordinary people could thaw him with heat, he couldn't even come into contact with room temperature. He had to thaw naturally in a freezer. What kind of environment was a freezer? The thawing speed was incredibly slow, indicating his unusual physique. It took Thea 10 whole days to crawl out of the ice, leaving him utterly exhausted and nearly starving. Unaware of his tragic past, Thea was simply curious about his armor and freeze gun, secretly deciding to study his equipment thoroughly once he was locked up. Bang! The distant explosion of gas startled the three silent people out of their trance. "Is that a bird?" Catwoman, naturally sensitive to fish and birds, asked with interest. "That's a plane," said cryogenic scientist Mr. Freeze, disdaining Catwoman's lack of knowledge. "That's Superman." Felicity, remotely controlling the Wayne family's satellite, immediately spotted the newcomer's identity and screamed like a complete lunatic, her voice so loud it made everyone's eardrums ring. Thea's forehead sank. "Enough. Are you exaggerating this? The man is wearing a blue bodysuit with a large S logo on the chest and a striking red cape. It's obviously Superman. His face is strong and his expression is full of sunshine, like the embodiment of positive energy. He hovered in the sky from a distance, making no attempt to come down to greet them. He's quite a character." Thea felt relieved now. Both thighs were there. And that little zombie couldn't just drop into the bowl with his hands in his hands? Huh? Her keen mental senses sensed a strong sense of being watched, and Thea instinctively looked up at the sky. That sunny guy was staring at her with a gleaming gaze. "Oh my God. He just said hello, and you're spying on me. What is he seeing with his ability of perspective? This guy doesn't have any weird quirks, does he?" She hugged her shoulders unconsciously. Chapter 127 Superman vs. Solomon Grundy. A quick thought dawned on her. This guy wasn't just misusing his superpowers to look at girls, he must have sensed something was wrong with her and taken a peek. Thea snorted heavily. Her secret had undoubtedly been discovered. There was no point trying to hide it from these idiots. It was hard to avoid detection with a heart so bright and golden. Next time, the combat uniforms had to have X-ray protection. There were so many things that could see through things these days. If she ran into a few lecherous people, she'd be in serious trouble. But when she glanced at Superman in the sky, she saw uncertainty on his face. He remained silent, only giving Thea a thoughtful greeting without further comment. Could it be that this guy hadn't noticed? Was Merlyn's bloodline truly powerful? It had built-in shielding? Thea wasn't sure if she was right, but she secretly thought about asking Superman for some information. Thea's thoughts aside, within 5 minutes, they all saw a small black dot approaching on the horizon. The Bat Fighter, fearing the zombies wouldn't catch up, didn't dare go too fast. He could only fire a few shots and fly for a bit before continuing. Honestly, this made Batman a bit uncomfortable. His Batfighter could fire backwards, but the on-off firing was unpleasant. He also had to concentrate on dodging the ground-to-air vehicles, ground-to-air telephone poles, and other objects thrown by the larger zombies. He was simply impressed by Thea's ability to keep running for hours. "You guys stay hidden here, I'll go check it out." The Batfighter, no matter how agile it was no match for a skateboard. It was true that a small boat was easier to turn. Thea saw Batman's predicament and, seeing Superman had no intention of getting on, decided to help. But before she had even gotten halfway across the distance, something unexpected happened. Either Batman had let his guard down or the Batfighter hadn't turned enough, and Grundy threw a rock weighing over 100 pounds like a sandbag. With a crack, it broke the Batfighter's left wing in half. Watching the Batfighter spin towards the ground, Thea quickly increased her speed, positioned herself, and unleashed 4 entangled arrows into the ground. The spider silk Dr. Hoffman had designed to prevent suicide attempts proved effective. As Superman watched in astonishment, the Batplane was caught in 4 dense layers of web. Thea scurried over to rescue Bruce, who had been rather kind to her. Batman, now in his black helmet, black armor, and black cape, even the exposed skin on his face had darkened. He was filled with shame and anger, having lost such a significant figure before his old rival. He secretly vowed to increase the Batplane's sensitivity by 300% next time. Because of his weapon's failure, his original plan of deep digging and burying the corpse had been temporarily abandoned, or at least impossible for the few men involved. Fortunately, reinforcements, eager to see his old rival's face off, finally decided to deploy. Superman chose not to act rashly, but instead used ranged attacks to test his opponent's strength. 2 orange-red lasers emanated from his eyes, striking the dazed zombie squarely. The massive zombie, caught off guard by the powerful laser, took 2 steps back and roared deafeningly at Superman. Ignoring the laser beams piercing his chest, he grabbed a massive rock and hurled it. Superman, capable of exceeding the speed of sound, was sure to escape the blow. He nimbly spun mid-air, dodging the rock and concentrating on his results. Things hadn't quite caught up with his expectations. The heat ray, which had always been so effective, hadn't caused much damage. He was also startled by the enemy's remarkable healing abilities. Could this creature truly be Earth? Its healing speed was almost as fast as ours. Believing in the principle of killing without fighting, Superman didn't waste any time. With his signature move, he brought his left hand back to his waist, his right fist raised high, and charged at Grundy. His supersonic speed instantly closed the gap between them. Though Grundy's brainwashed state reduced him to instinct, his natural reflexes remained. He didn't retreat, roaring and thrusting his massive fist forward. Boom! A sonic boom echoed at the point where the two met, the immense force sending the air scattering in all directions. Trees and rocks near the two were instantly pulverized by the powerful shockwave. Catwoman and Batman were both experienced and had already taken cover. Thea also quickly gained altitude, dodging the powerful aftermath. This power was truly unreasonable. No wonder Batman disliked Superman. Your immense strength puts us, who have worked so hard to train, to shame. No matter how well we train, it's useless. Although Thea considered herself to be quite magnanimous, encountering such an inhumane battle for the first time still made her stomach boil. She was so jealous. This highlighted the importance of reincarnation. Fortunately, Superman wasn't omnipotent. Perhaps their physical strength was too great, with all their talent points invested in strength, speed, and physique, leaving them with absurdly low magic resistance. With even the slightest bit of magical mastery, a single mind control strike would bring the red-caped creature to its knees, chanting "Conquer." This thought brought a much greater sense of balance. From a life-level perspective, she knew she was at least a step ahead of the Master still brooding over his evil plans. Thea relaxed her composure and focused on the epic battle Gotham hadn't seen in a century. Superman, through constant probing, had determined his foe was nearly equal in strength. However, his opponent's lack of flight seemed to offer some advantage. He began to exploit his mobility, flying around Grundy. Despite the giant zombie's efforts to counterattack, Superman's fists continued to rain down on him. The battle grew larger and larger, trees and mountains being torn apart by the aftermath of their attacks. Deep furrows were carved into the once flat ground by Grundy's fury. Thea flew high, watching the battle intently. She had no idea who had taught Superman his fighting style. He loved to grab his enemies and toss them around like bowling pins, then stomp away with a sullen expression. As one of the world's greatest martial artists, Thea couldn't understand why. Was this necessary? That little bit of damage from the throw wouldn't be as effective as a punch. Throwing the enemy away would just give up the early advantage. Grundy, perhaps having been thrown a few times, found it amusing and started a throwing game with Superman. You grab my neck and throw me, I grab your cape and send you flying. The battlefield grew uncontrollably. Thea had already descended from high above. The sky was even more dangerous than the ground. Hiding beside Batman, the experienced uncle had already hidden in a shallow pit, watching the battle unfold like a demolition. This was why so many people were attacking Superman. You're so careless about the environment. This once picturesque place is now like a post-nuclear wasteland. You could film your next apocalypse movie right here. Thea's only word for Superman was brainless. The battle lasted 10 minutes. Although the zombie was at a significant disadvantage, Superman's continued failure to defeat it made him increasingly anxious. Spotting an opening, he circled around the zombie and delivered a powerful punch to the back of its head. Chapter 128 The dust settles. The giant zombie had completely entered into instinctive combat mode. Hearing the gust of wind from the side, he stretched out a pale hand without a second thought and grabbed Superman's fist, a sinister grin on his face. Superman struggled twice, but couldn't break free. What was going on? The two of them had always been about the same strength. This guy's strength suddenly increased. He shouted to the others. In his impression, this giant must have been the product of some ambitious human scientist's tinkering, and the people in Gotham should know something about it. But Batman and the others were always running around, and had never fought so openly. How could they know why? Fortunately, Thea vaguely remembered that the giant zombie had something called the Ash of Withering. Observing Grundy's surroundings carefully, she saw a faint gray mist swirling around him. Tell Superman to stop hitting the enemy in the head. Did Commissioner Gordon just say the court created a new personality to control it? Look at the mist surrounding it. I suspect its increased power means its old personality is about to awaken. Thea briefly recounted her analysis to Batman. Mist? Why can't I see it? The old man looked for a long time, puzzled, but couldn't see any mist. Oh no. Could I be the only one who could see it? Two figures suddenly appeared in her mind. The black Thea grabbed the white Thea and slapped her hard. Pa, you're so talkative. You're so talkative. Thea wiped the non-existent sweat from her forehead and said nothing. Batman glanced at her with a puzzled look. Then let's use our own method to confine it. He then picked up a device and whispered something. Superman, in the distance, froze for a moment before changing his attack angle and began to strike Grundy's legs. Oh, you two have a special communication channel, Thea thought to herself. Their friendship is truly bizarre, a mixture of both rivalry and cooperation. Batman whispered a few more words, then turned to Thea and said, take Selina and the others up there and freeze it. Okay, Thea said without hesitation, grabbing Catwoman and Mr. Freeze and flying towards the demolition site. Superman, guided by their instructions, had abandoned the zombie's head and instead attacked its legs and arms. The gray energy that was about to take shape seemed to be restrained, and was sporadically withdrawing into his body. Superman once again had the upper hand in terms of power. Unleashing his full power, Superman was no exaggeration. With punches, kicks, and heat rays, Grundy was like a punching bag, his limbs broken. Even with his formidable recovery, his cell repair had inevitably slowed after such a long battle. Come over here, the sun-drenched Superman waved to the people on the skateboard. Hurry, get down, Catwoman commanded Mr. Freeze, gesturing with a remote. Despite his reluctance, Mr. Freeze hopped off his skateboard at a canter. Catwoman, dissatisfied with his slow pace, even gave him a vicious kick. Once near Grundy, he ignored its still snarling maw and yanked the trigger at its head. Visible icy mist quickly coated its skin. Mr. Freeze knew that if the giant zombie escaped, the two flying in the sky wouldn't be afraid. He, being the closest and slowest, would be the first to suffer. Superman also had freeze breath, and perhaps to balance the overall situation, he released it after Mr. Freeze. Seeing how lively they were, Thea, in the spirit of getting a kill, also fired a freezing arrow. Mr. Freeze, now fully powered, unleashed a torrent of freezing gas without Catwoman's prompting. Occasionally, he could hear the zombie's muffled roars, terrifying him even more. He continuously shifted his angles, freezing the entire ground until the pressure tank was completely depleted. He stopped, stepped back, and watched breathlessly as the next development unfolded. Batman wasn't idle either. He converted the Batplane, with half its wing broken off, into a Batcopter. He then pulled a square metal box from Wayne Enterprises, a full 10 cubic meters in size. Made entirely of solid tungsten, it could withstand temperatures of 3,000 degrees Celsius. He lowered it over the frozen zombie, then poured a steady stream of cement into the gap within. Watching Solomon Grundy gradually fade into oblivion, Thea felt a pang of regret. As a novice mage, she sensed a powerful force from the giant zombie. This force wasn't physical, but something far higher, inexplicable. If she could study it, she believed it would enhance her own abilities. But now wasn't the right time. It was difficult to tamper with it under the watchful eyes of Batman and Superman. Moreover, her own strength was weak. Even if she could gain access to the giant zombie's power, her lack of control might cause further trouble. Are you? Cousin Kara Danvers, Superman asked uncertainly, flying in front of Thea. He had always felt that this girl was strange. His X-rays were completely inaccessible. He could see the various abnormalities that others couldn't see, but he could. Every second, a steady stream of sunlight was pouring into Thea's body. In all his years on Earth, This was the first time he had seen someone absorb sunlight. He couldn't see what he looked like when exposed to the sun, and he wasn't sure if this was a standard Kryptonian reaction. The sunlight naturally reminded him of his cousin, Kara Danvers, whom he hadn't seen in years. Batman, who had been dazed, suddenly perked up. What the hell? You're related to Superman? And you're Talia's sister. Does that mean Talia is also an alien? Just as Batman was wondering if he should go back and strangle his son, Thea's face turned green. No, absolutely not. Hero, you got the wrong person. How can you guys just claim relatives so randomly? Your reputation would drop by thousands if you claimed your relationship in front of Batman, wouldn't it? And what's more, you're not related at all. I'm leaving now. I'll contact you if you need anything. Superman said nothing utter categorical denial. He said something cool to Batman, nodded to the others, and with a standard takeoff, he broke the sound barrier and disappeared from their sight. Batman chatted with Thea with a normal expression, asking about tiredness and feeling unwell. Damn, Thea was a little depressed. Her reputation must have dropped, but fortunately not much. All they could do was ask Catwoman to talk them over. If she couldn't do it alone, she'd call Talia. They had to restore their reputation. What should we do next? Seeing the giant zombie sealed in a 10 cubic meter box, everyone, including Mr. Freeze, breathed a sigh of relief. This indestructible and immensely powerful creature was truly formidable, at least in a place like Gotham where intelligence was the key. This giant creature was too reckless, capable of flipping tables at will. It was unacceptable to heroes and villains alike. Bury it on the spot, the old man's deep voice carried through the voice changer. This kind of digging and burying a person was definitely not for the heroes. Commissioner Gordon, known as Gotham's most indestructible bug, quickly appeared in sight. He brought a number of workers and excavation equipment, briefly explained the situation, and began digging on the spot. Batman suggested burying the body as deep as possible. Of course, Thea didn't want such a hassle, but she had no reason to object. Finally, the construction manager said, "Since you're well funded, we can only go 10,000 meters at most. Any more drills wouldn't go any deeper." I had wanted to see the details, but when I heard they were going to drill 10,000 meters deep, I immediately fled. Can we even find oil? I wondered how long it would take. Using the excuse of going back to rest, I said goodbye to the others and flew back. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Mind Control Simple Version 1.0. Catherine, come down and keep us company. Mom, it's so dark in here, come play with me, you stinking woman. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. In the ornate bedroom, a middle-aged woman, her face shrouded in fear, suddenly woke from her sleep. No. Don't come over here. As the ticking of a clock echoed through the quiet room, she finally realized where she was. She glanced in the mirror, her face drooping, a trace of fear occasionally etched between her brows. She rubbed her forehead. This is the third day I've had a nightmare. Damn it. This lousy place is uninhabitable. Angrily, she pressed the call button on the bedside, hoping her loyal men would escort her to another safe location. But after waiting for 3 full minutes, there was silence outside the door, only the sound of her own increasingly heavy breathing could be heard. She knew she was in trouble, so she pulled a pistol from the bedside table and glanced around cautiously. Hi, Mom, good evening. She heard the sudden greeting, and without thinking, she fired a shot through the window where the voice came from. The man was shot and fell to the ground, which made her feel relieved. But before she could calm down and think, the man with the same tone of voice and the same attire appeared at the window again and greeted her. Hi, good evening, Mom. By the time she had defeated the third strange man, her nerves were already stretched to the limit. Although she was not a killer, her shooting skills were well practiced. Her shots must have hit the man, but he seemed unharmed. Who is this person? Or what was this thing? She tried to calm herself down, gripping the handle of her gun tightly, trying to find some comfort. When the strange man appeared at the window for the 4th time, she did not open fire rashly, wanting to hear what this strange man wanted from her. The strange man, shrouded in black mist, came to the window and saw that she did not attack, but instead looked at her warily. knowing that she was one step closer to success. He carelessly climbed into the bedroom. "Don't come near me," a middle-aged woman named Catherine pointed her gun at the mist man with trembling hands. Despite trying to rally herself, she was still terrified by the sudden and extraordinary phenomenon. How could a normal person be engulfed by the mist? It was hard to say whether this guy was even human. But soon, she was overwhelmed by even greater fear, and she couldn't think about the mist man anymore. The mist man extended his smoke-wrapped arm and snapped his fingers. "Give me the gun." Catherine thought he was mentally challenged. "Why would I give you a gun?" Though perfectly conscious, her body moved uncontrollably toward the mist man and stiffly handed him the gun. This bizarre scene nearly frightened her to death. She felt as if a taut string in her head snapped instantly. Reason, logic, all vanished. She was finished. After so many evil deeds, finally, this day of remission was here. 3 parts fear, 3 parts resentment, and a touch of disbelief, she stood before the mist man, trembling like a sieve. The black fog figure that appeared here was naturally Gotham's good friend, Miss Thea. Having resolved the Grundy incident, she knew her Gotham adventure was coming to an end. Both Moira's campaign and further studies would require her to return to Star City. She spent the remaining days concentrating on dealing with the Court of Owls. This organization is more of a loose club than an organization, with a fluid membership, but members must be Gotham natives and possess sufficient social standing. The court has controlled Gotham City for 200 years. In his youth, Batman once destroyed some of their strongholds, but they miraculously avoided catastrophic destruction. This time, taking advantage of the chaos in Gotham, they've reemerged. Their hiding methods aren't particularly sophisticated, they simply hide among the people. Batman, with his extensive connections to the locals, naturally couldn't find these enemies hiding in the upper echelons of society. This wasn't a problem for Thea. She only needed a breakthrough, not everyone. 3 days ago, she activated the nano-tracker in Talon's body. The woman they tracked down was the court's liaison officer for external affairs. For the next 3 days, Thea continuously used magic to infect the dreams of this middle-aged woman named Catherine, using numerous terrifying scenarios to gradually break down her psychological defenses. Finally, today, she achieved preliminary control. Of course, she wouldn't say she was developing mind control spells specifically to deal with a muscled man in a red cloak. There was definitely a misunderstanding. Thea sighed. Despite the stumbling process, she had finally succeeded. If Merlyn knew his descendants had taken 3 nights to successfully perform such a simple dream spell, he would surely emerge from the depths of the multiverse and shower her with fireballs. This was the pain of having no one to teach her. Thea knew she was a failure, but this was truly her limit. She pieced together the information she had learned from the secret realm, combined it with the engraving on the dagger, and various reliable and unreliable theories on the internet. Finally, she managed to perform the spell. To make the spell more effective, she conjured 3 clones to die. The moment she thought she had escaped, they kicked her down, completely shattering her sanity. Of course, this wasn't magic, it was the realm of modern psychology. To deal with this woman, Thea had used every possible means at her disposal. The clone technique only consumed physical strength, which was fine, but the Black Mist technique consumed her meager magical power. She'd used it 4 times to deepen her impression, and she was nearing her limit. Thea placed a hand on Catherine's forehead and, under her blank gaze, began to read her memories. Reading isn't the right word for human memory. Memory isn't a piece of paper, but a scroll with layers of layers. Despite some mental preparation, Thea had to pause after reading through the top 3 layers. The content was too much and too complex, requiring constant digestion. She had to discard the middle-aged woman's chaotic thoughts and memories, retaining only the matters concerning the court that concerned her. Emitting a laugh that sounded gentle but, in reality, terrifying after being processed by a voice changer, Thea sat down, pulled out her notes, and began researching how to read memories more efficiently. The Court of Owls liaison officer, Catherine Monroe, stood motionless. It wasn't fear that prevented her from moving, but she was completely out of control. Thea's brutal memory reading had damaged her brain, leaving her dazed and confused, unable to distinguish between dream and reality. After reviewing her experiences, Thea refined her reading method. Switching from a surface-based reading to a point-based one, discarding all junk memories and speeding up the process to avoid arousing suspicion by leaving the camp too long. The reading had already begun, and Catherine's surface thoughts were flooded with thoughts like, am I dreaming? And when can I wake up? Interestingly, this middle-aged woman's mind wasn't completely controlled by the spell. Instead, she believed she was still in a dream, and the previous shooting conversations had been buried deep within her mind. This was a classic example of an ostrich's mentality. She had originally planned to gather the court members, do a single act, and then leave, but now it seemed she could achieve something bigger. Thea continued her probing, this time not lingering on the memories, but intently delving into their very depths. Soon, she uncovered many of the woman's most terrifying memories, buried deep within her heart, either eroded by time or through psychological treatment. Haha, Thea had found the memory of her earlier scare. The entire memory, a deep black hue tinged with traces of magic, was actively absorbing the surrounding terrifying memories. When it completely consumed all the surrounding memories, the middle-aged woman named Catherine would die from the sudden shock, manifesting as respiratory distress and cardiac arrest. Of course, Thea couldn't let her die. This woman wasn't known for her strong will, and she held a high position. This was a powerful tool for her control of the court. She had originally intended to make a one-time deal, but now, seeing another possibility, she immediately revised her plans. She wanted to control the Court of Owls. Whether it was the wealth of these families or her plans to control Gotham, these so-called upper-class people would be extremely useful to her. Moreover, perhaps through their connections, she could even find a way to further her magical cultivation. Thea began to consciously revise the nightmare she had created. Because it was somewhat tainted with her own magic, the memory did not reject her. As her magic steadily flowed, clusters of ancient, gray memories were replaced by magical memories. These new memories, she reworked into a cliched contract of obedience, would allow the middle-aged woman named Catherine Monroe to accept Thea's commands from the depths of her heart. Her normal conversations and actions remained unaffected. Furthermore, the magical memories had completely taken over her fear memory zone, rendering her fearless. She wondered if this could be considered a blessing. In the final stage, Thea left a small portion of her own mental power deep within her mind. If Catherine were forcibly brainwashed, this power would detonate her consciousness, turning her into a fool. There were too many superpowers in this world, so she had to be on guard. Whoosh, Thea withdrew from Catherine's consciousness. Her mental power was significantly depleted. If it weren't for the immense power she gained after the fusion, she wouldn't have been able to withstand such a massive drain. She dispelled the enveloping black fog and snapped her fingers to see the results. The woman named Catherine instantly regained control of her body. Upon seeing Thea's true face, the surprise on her face gradually turned to excitement, and finally to ecstasy. Shia, when did you come? I'll get you something to eat. Is there something you want me to do? Tell me now. Chapter 130 Remote Control Court of Owls. Catherine's enthusiasm was a bit overwhelming for Thea, but after trying a few small commands, the results were quite impressive. Thea didn't have the whimsical idea of a master-servant contract. Being called master by a sallow-faced old woman on her knees wasn't a good look. It might have been a more practical option with a young woman. She opted for a friendly contract, which presented a lower level of psychological resistance. Modern people are highly resistant to master-servant arrangements, especially in the United States, where the casual lifestyle is ubiquitous. Forcing her to accept it would expose psychological scars that would spill over into her daily life, exposing flaws and hindering future planning. A friendly contract would preserve her full mental and cognitive abilities. With the exception of the command to kill her, all other commands would be carried out. Even someone skilled in hypnosis wouldn't be able to uncover the problem without extensive memory searches. Over the next 2 days, Thea repeated her tricks, brainwashing another key figure in the Court of Owls, Luigi Falcone, the current patriarch of the Falcone family, the city's leading crime family. His brother, Mario Falcone, had died at the hands of Gordon Sr. years before he took over the family business. Despite a sly rejoicing, he continued to rant daily about demanding revenge for Gordon Sr.'s bloodshed. He'd repeated this repetitive rhetoric for 20 years, until he'd even come to believe it. Catherine had lured Luigi to her residence under the pretext of discussing future matters. Thea, not bothering to slowly corrupt him in her dreams, simply struck him in the back of the neck, knocking him unconscious and then slowly forcing herself upon him. Thea's preparations had paid off. Luigi, with his long history in the underworld, was far more resilient than Catherine's. But after 2 days of tireless effort, she had finally secured a man, a representative of the Black family in court, under her wing. Seeing the tall, bald man, his face covered in age spots, bow his head before her. Thea felt a sense of accomplishment. Catherine Monroe embodied Gotham's old aristocracy, the city's founder. She could, to a certain extent, determine the direction of the court. Luigi Falcone was a godfather of the city's underworld, exerting considerable influence over several other major crime families. These two represented the radical and conservative factions within the court. Thea had no intention of forcing them to work together. She would maintain the status quo, assuming they had accomplished their mission, and that they would continue to receive continuous financial support. Both reported directly to Thea, so even if one betrayed her, the other could still hold them back and await further orders. From now on, I need you to transfer 3% of the court's operating funds to my secret account every month. After checking that her two conflicting underlings had no objections, she continued. Also, instruct the major families within the court to collect all books on the occult, the older the better. I want the originals. The monthly percentage might seem small, but it was actually a significant sum. This represented contributions from dozens of major families, a crucial requirement for the cash-strapped Thea. The same goes for books. Asking Thea to collect them would kill her. Many of these families have been passed down for centuries. And there might be some notes in books from their ancestors that have survived to this day. Rather than letting them gather dust in their hands, it's better to give them to her to make good use of their remaining value. Finally, she asked for various human experiment data and reports on the resurrection of the deceased. Remarkable, Thea flipped through the reports, her eyes filled with admiration for the court's research achievements. They began research on resurrecting the dead 50 years ago, initially at the instigation of these death-fearing old nobles. However, it wasn't until 20 years ago that they saw initial success. They combined several animal cells with powerful self-repair abilities to create a new substance. Then, using nuclear radiation, they implanted it into the DNA of the deceased. Then, through a series of electroshocks, burning, and freezing procedures, they activated the cell's self-repair abilities, bringing the deceased back to life. However, these seemingly promising experimental results weren't as promising in actual clinical practice. Several court leaders who had reached the end of their lives underwent this experiment, but without exception, they all failed. Through repeated comparisons, they concluded that it was ineffective in cases of natural death, and only had a limited effect on those who died unnaturally. A 10% chance, Thea chuckled at the final conclusion. How much money had been spent over the past 50 years? Vast resources thrown into the water, only to get a 10% chance of success? Throwing the unreliable document aside, Thea picked up a small bottle and examined the 3 drops of grayish-white, nearly transparent liquid within. Solomon Grundy's heart blood. These drops of blood were a pleasant surprise for Thea. She hadn't expected the court to even target a giant zombie. They found a giant zombie that had surfaced, conducted a simulation, and spent 15 days working tirelessly with a machine to extract these 3 drops of nearly transparent blood from its heart. To ordinary people, this blood was simply strange and beyond common sense. But to Thea, who traversed the supernatural, it was truly astonishing. The power within these drops was so immense that even a brief induction nearly injured Thea. Gray, decayed, and highly corrosive, this was definitely not the power of justice. Thea was somewhat relieved that she couldn't absorb this thing. Her intuition told her that if she did, she would at best turn into a zombie, at worst die. This was not a power a living person should possess. But not absorbing it didn't mean she had to return it to the court. This thing could still be of some use to her. Living people couldn't use it, but dead things could still use it. Thea looked at the sword of Azrael in her hand. The fact that this sharp sword had been brought into the trial in the first place showed that it had something extraordinary. As Thea analyzed the dagger, she was certain that it was originally forged as a magical weapon, but for some reason this crucial step was not completed. There were no inscriptions engraved, and no spell circuits written into it. Originally, this sword could only be a semi-finished product to complete its life as a sword, but now it seemed that with the help of Grandy's blood, she could complete the final step. But this required a great deal of time and knowledge. With Thea's time in Gotham dwindling, the matter of magical weapons would have to be relegated to the future. She instructed her subordinates to remain in hiding, fully supporting Batman if he ran for commissioner of the Gotham Police Department and dragging him into the various fundraising and dinner disputes of the upper class. The court's primary mission was to take over the city's shady areas, whether it was the Penguin or the Scarecrow's territory. Of course, the court couldn't appoint the official leader, It would maintain its traditional approach, operating remotely, neither distancing nor getting too close. Meanwhile, Thea considered their ongoing resurrection experiments and decided not to stop them. After so many years of research, they finally had some clues, so they should continue their research. Chapter 131 Director Bruce. Having successfully conquered Arkham and rescued numerous civilians, Batman's recent days have been generally pleasant. Catwoman's jealousy was thwarted by Bruce's persistent pursuit, and the two have rekindled their former closeness. With the improvement of Gotham's security situation, training for the two apprentices has gradually resumed. Whenever Batman gets serious, Barbara finds the workload overwhelming. She has to attend school during the day and fight crime with her team at night, leaving her entire remaining time for training, leaving her no time for her favorite pursuits with Robin. But every time she feels like giving up, she catches a glimpse of Thea's charming, half-smile. Her unyielding spirit keeps her gritting her teeth and persevering. In her free time from crafting her robotic arm, Thea joins them in practice. With her fighting skills alone, she can now hold her own against even Batman for a long time, let alone Barbara and Robin. Even if they were to attack together, she'd be able to defeat them with some effort. Batman had recently been pondering Thea's suggestion of him becoming commissioner, repeatedly considering it and seeking advice from various parties. His old butler, Alfred, played a crucial role in his decision. Alfred believed that becoming commissioner was far more appealing than being a playboy, a sounding board for both the Wayne family's reputation and his own safety. He had watched Bruce grow up and didn't want him to be constantly fighting crime. The Brockback incident had particularly terrified the 80-year-old butler. Although he had never met Thea, he now had a strong fondness for her and frequently urged Bruce to become commissioner. The butler was like a father figure to Batman, his reputation steadfastly admiring. Hearing her repeated exhortations, he couldn't help but feel tempted. Commissioner Gordon also supported the idea. He was approaching 60, and the situation at the Gotham Police Department wasn't great, but it wasn't too bad either. If Bruce could take over, he could rest in peace even if he died soon. With the two most important elders in his life supporting this proposal, he couldn't think of any reason to refuse. However, out of caution, he didn't jump in and instead tentatively submitted an application for president of the Gotham Police Officers Union. America is teeming with unions, from the Screen Actors Guild to the Directors Guild, everything imaginable exists. This police union has been a mere formality, completely ignored for years. Master Bruce had originally planned to test the waters and wait a few days to see how things would play out, but the overwhelming coverage the next day by the media terrified him. Commissioner Gordon, as the head of the department, quietly leaked information within the department. He also had Thea remotely controlling the Court of Owls and leveraging his extensive network of connections to vigorously promote his cause. The prodigal son returns and joins the Gotham police force, declared the Gotham Times front page. A rising star is ready to join. A breath of fresh air in the police force. The Gotham Evening Post also ran a full-page report. The Gotham Morning News even did a special episode. They stopped Lucius Fox on his way to work at 6 in the morning. The black man didn't know what was going on, and was so confused by the barrage of questions that he could only choose to praise Bruce. Suddenly, Bruce Wayne's image went from playboy to Gotham's savior. As these reports rolled out, the old man was stunned. Do I have such a high reputation? Is this a trick of the enemy? But seeing Lucius talking so eloquently on the screen, it didn't seem like it. He asked Catwoman for her opinion. Go, why not? Catwoman also had some hope for him to become the director. Those damn cops had held her captive for 20 years, and now she was the director's wife. Wouldn't they be furious? Even Robin and Barbara were positive. Robin had aspirations of becoming a police officer, and now that his teacher was joining the force was a good thing. Barbara had simply been subjected to excessive training from him. Forget commissioner, if she could just take a few days off, she'd be eager for him to become UN Secretary General. Master Bruce canvassed his circle and discovered that everyone in his circle supported his appointment as commissioner, not a single one opposed. This finally gave him peace of mind, despite his advanced paranoia. There was no conspiracy, so he went for it. Upon learning that he had indeed submitted his commissioner application to the city government, Thea breathed a sigh of relief. No matter how well hidden the Court of Owls was, clues would always show up. Finding something for the incredibly intelligent Batman to do would make it much easier for him to divert resources from Gotham. He instructed Catherine and Luigi to mobilize resources from the police, government, and business communities to keep Batman at bay and distract him from the city's financial flows. From her official appearance in the public eye to her ascension to the position of director, a conservative estimate suggests she could have diverted his attention for at least 2 years. During this time, Thea received a steady supply of supplies from Gotham and Wayne Enterprises. Indeed, dozens of families within the Court of Owls effectively controlled Wayne Enterprises. If you add in Thea's holdings, the holdings were overwhelming. However, these controlling shares were kept secret. For over 20 years, the Court of Owls had resisted Bruce's access to the board, but both sides remained restrained, and the conflict remained solely within the realm of business. Of course, Thea had no interest in controlling Wayne Enterprises. Her own strength lay in her pursuit. Although hidden from the public, Wayne Enterprises offered a free choice of all its advanced technologies and equipment, significantly enhancing her technical expertise and clearing many obstacles for the production of the Iron Man suit. Realizing her journey in Gotham was drawing to a close, Thea began to bid farewell to everyone. Beyond the pavilion, along the ancient road, lush green grass stretched to the horizon. That was impossible. We were all modern people, able to talk and video chat. What was there to say goodbye to? Finally, on the Wayne Enterprises helipad, 4 members of Batman's family and friends, along with Commissioner Gordon, gave the Star City duo a special farewell. Thea was amazed at the rapidity with which Catwoman and Felicity's friendship blossomed. They both retreated to a corner, pulling out their phones and engaging in some inexplicable activity. Even though I've said it so many times, I still want to say thank you. It's an honor to meet you. Bruce, who had been incredibly busy these past few days, found time to say goodbye. It's also an honor to meet you. While she didn't agree with his methods, Batman's shining personality was admirable. The two shook hands, and Thea exchanged a few words with Commissioner Gordon. Honestly, they'd interacted more than anyone else, and she had nothing but admiration for this incredibly charming old man. She exchanged a few casual words with Barbara and Robin, believing it wasn't a life or death farewell. They'd likely see each other again. Take care, everyone. The duo got into the helicopter. Shia waved to everyone in the cockpit. The plane slowly rose to a high altitude and flew towards Star City. Chapter 132 Mascot. Returning to Star City, Thea barely had time to catch her breath before she was dragged away by Moira, who had been anxiously waiting for her for 3 days. Moira had already begun preparing for her candidacy. To win voter approval, she had to put on a show, pretending to be low income, or rather, not a billionaire. She had to transfer her assets. Donating them to society was foolishness, and no one would do that. The prevailing rule was to pass them on to their children. While a bit exaggerated, nearly all the candidates presented themselves as downright poor, recounting the plight in televised debates. Some even went so far as to move from wealthy neighborhoods to live in the slums, simply to appear accessible. Moira's standards weren't quite so low, and she had no intention of trading her family's mansion for public housing. However, she still had to transfer her family assets. A billionaire running directly was possible, but it would appear unconventional. Her campaign style was more of a steady, practical one, with no need for eye-catching initiatives. Before Thea could comprehend what was happening, she was surrounded by nearly 15 lawyers, spending the entire morning signing documents. If she hadn't been afraid of shocking the world, she would have almost released her clone to do it. The documents were so numerous that she had to write her name at least 1,000 times that entire morning, her wrists sore. While the Quinn family's assets were officially hers, she was still a minor. Regulations varied across the United States, with the average adult age being 18. In Star City, the age limit was 17, leaving her a year short. Until she reached adulthood, her guardian still controlled all her finances, naturally Moira. So, after all the detours, her mother still had a firm grip on everything, unaffected. After all, this was the first step in a long journey. Even inheriting a company was so cumbersome, and those inheriting the throne in ancient times must have been even more nervous. Reclaiming the Court of Owls was a brilliant move. She had the funds, connections, and subordinates. She had it all. If she waited for the Quinn group to fall on her head, who knows how long it would take. After a busy morning, Thea officially took over in the afternoon. Of course, she wasn't expected to work at the company. The black man, Walter Steele, managed the company so well that she didn't need to cause any trouble. She only needed to be on the board. As Moira's only surviving child, she had to campaign for her mother's election. To put it bluntly, she had to act as a mascot, proving how successful and remarkable her mother Moira was in raising her, and trying to attract as many women's votes as possible. Thea was wearing a light red dress. Although she had told her costume designer not to wear anything revealing since she was going to a low-income community, the bearded costume designer still found her a dress that showed off a large area of her back. When she emerged from the dressing room, everyone, including Moira, was stunned by her fair skin. During her last days in Gotham, Thea had consumed a green object that looked like a devil fruit. Perhaps due to her earth element, the transformation was quite gentle. There was no severe bleeding or labor pain, only a few days of gastrointestinal discomfort, which was then completely resolved. When Thea carefully examined the changes within herself, she discovered that the transformation hadn't strengthened her blood vessels, and no excess golden blood had appeared in her heart. Instead, her lungs had experienced a qualitative leap. A mysterious intuition informed her that her blood-forming function had been greatly enhanced. While it normally took her a year to automatically evolve a drop of golden blood, the time had now been reduced to 3 months. Her resistance to toxins had also been enhanced. Externally, her figure had become more graceful, her lines more toned, and the muscles that had gradually developed through training were now hidden. Her skin was so radiant that even without extra care, it would make the women around her feel gloomy. As a mother, Moira wasn't worried about her daughter stealing the show, she was only concerned about her daughter's continued success and who would be worthy of her. Thea had previously sent Moira numerous photos from Gotham, all of which were taken at Bruce's private beach, which Felicity had photoshopped to look like Malibu. Moira initially flipped through the pages, but as she looked, she spotted a familiar figure, Bruce Wayne. As America's biggest playboy, she'd certainly seen him before. Seeing the obvious acquaintance in the photo, Moira couldn't help but wonder if her daughter had been deceived, or if she'd been too controlling, dazzled by the playboy's extravagant spending. A myriad of thoughts crossed her mind, but in the end, the only thing she could think of was that they were actually a good match. Bruce was a bit older, but he was rich. They could just get married and then divorce. Honestly, there weren't many men in Europe and America who could be considered a good match for Thea. The rich were too old, and the poor weren't good enough. Moira was consumed with worry for her daughter. She secretly sent her men to Gotham to investigate Bruce's every habit, but Bruce's hidden abilities were so well equipped that even so many villains couldn't find him, let alone Moira's own men. Furthermore, with Gotham in turmoil, nothing was ultimately uncovered. Moira could only keep the matter to herself, waiting for the right moment to discuss it with her daughter. Unaware that her photo had revealed a flaw, Thea stood a foot behind Moira, smiling, watching her mother shake hands with the housewives who had arrived upon hearing the news. Her thoughts had long been on the necklace she was wearing. This sky blue necklace had been a gift from Malcolm, see Chapter 13 for details. After returning from Star City, she had stumbled upon the inscriptions on its interior, which were quite interesting. It turned out to be a magical item, just like the Black Mist dagger. The dagger had only 4 elementary inscriptions, but the necklace boasted 15. The deciphering and understanding of the various runes made the necklace nearly 10 times more difficult than the dagger itself. It was obvious that this was a legacy passed down from Malcolm's ancestral line, but in modern times, with no one awakening their bloodline, it had become a mere trinket. Thea, deeply resentful of her own lack of means to defeat the enemy, was overjoyed. But after reading just 2 words, she was a bit dumbfounded. Even though Thea had been studying this magical language lately, she lacked a foundational textbook. Many words required guesswork. If she got them right, it was fine, but if she got them wrong, it was a complete waste of time. Progress was slow as a snail. She took a few deep breaths, realizing she had gotten a little impatient. She slowly adjusted her mindset and watched Moira speak eloquently on the stage about women's and children's rights, the audience occasionally erupting in applause. The noise was too loud here, so Thea clapped her hands a few times, pretending to return to her studies. For now, she'd better stick to being the mascot. Chapter 133 Laurel's current situation. Even putting on a show proved difficult. For 3 days, Thea played the good girl, pondering the inscription on her necklace. However, her expressionless face invited the media's unbridled interpretation, and within 3 days, she was bombarded with negative reports. Reports like, the eldest daughter of the Quinn family is incredibly arrogant, and her elementary school classmates are telling stories about her past, and Thea Quinn hangs out at bars, drinking all night long. Moira reassured her against taking it personally, saying it was all part of her opponent's strategy. Thea understood she had been singled out as a target. Who doesn't gossip about others behind their backs? The European and American media are just that way. Talk all you want, it won't hurt me. Compared to Bruce, who toils for Gotham by night and is berated by day, her own approach was relatively mild. But the mother and daughter didn't care. The passionate young men on the campaign team were keen on the resume, and that day, they were publicly promoting a certain eloquent pseudo-elite to persuade Thea, Miss Quinn, that, despite having repeated the line 10 times, the young talent couldn't help but feel a little nervous when facing Thea. Having personally organized 2 major Gotham fights and participated in them was no joke, as she had directly caused the deaths of hundreds and injured thousands, impacting countless families and their futures. At this moment, Thea's aura was rather cool and ethereal, and the profound transformation of her bloodline gave her a slightly oppressive air. She was mentally calculating the 7th inscription on her necklace, which held a link between the previous and the next. A thorough understanding would greatly aid in her subsequent interpretations. Now that the young man had interrupted her train of thought, she wasn't annoyed, but rather a little frustrated. She glanced at him with a gleaming gaze, refusing to respond, signaling him to speak up if necessary, otherwise, to get out. The young talent nearly fell to the ground at her gaze. Was that a human gaze? It was terrifying. But remembering her mission, all the years of hard work she'd put into her career, she stammered, "Our campaign team hopes you'll be more approachable and less stern." Without waiting for a response, she forced a smile and scurried off. Knowing he wasn't trying to strike up a conversation, Thea's clenched fists softened. Ever since her bloodline awakened and Moira had brought her to the forefront, she'd been irritated by the constant stream of flowers and the constant stream of people using lame excuses to talk. She could deal with Gotham's villains with a submachine gun, but using force against these flies was definitely not the right approach. She thought for a few days, and decided to endure it until Moira finished her citywide speech. Then she could rest. As for the young man's so-called stern face, she couldn't help it. She was completely absorbed in studying the inscriptions. While science couldn't yet explain it, Thea considered it a form of science. Expecting her to laugh while she pondered was a bit of a stretch. These young people running for office are taking this too seriously. It's all just a process, arranged long ago by the higher-ups. How many council members does old Ma control on the city council, and how many does Moira control? The Court of Owls, while purportedly staying out of Gotham, still manages to influence a certain number of people. And finally, with the involvement of the Eye, it's almost 100% in favor. How could he possibly not be elected? Voters' opinions remain just that, opinions. Once the election results are in, who's you? Calling a horse a zebra is a daily occurrence. Shaking his head, he gathered his scattered thoughts and returned to his research. Thea, take the bus home by yourself. I have a dinner party to attend soon. After finally getting through another day, Moira, knowing she didn't enjoy socializing, gave her the day off to have fun. Thea also resented dining with those successful, bloated people. They were like a bunch of larvae, so greasy that even her arrows couldn't penetrate them. Knowing she wouldn't have to suffer, she happily gave her mother a hug. She declined the bodyguard's offer to accompany her. They looked big and strong, but she could beat 10 of them barehanded. With weapons and full magical powers, she would kill as many as they came. It was completely useless. She looked around before getting in the car and found no one under it, so she started the engine and drove away. She couldn't help but be careful. This wasn't an assassination attempt or sabotage. It was mainly because of the gossip tabloid's ruthlessness. 2 days ago, when Thea was about to get out of the car at an event, she saw a man in black lying under her car. At first, she thought he was a scammer, but after asking, she found out he was a paparazzi from a gossip magazine. He was so reckless that he didn't mean to kill anyone, but just wanted to take a picture of her skirt when she got out of the car. Upon learning the truth, Thea turned pale with anger. Killing him outright wouldn't be appropriate, so she just beat him up and said a few words to him. No matter how powerful Malcolm was, or how many claws the Court of Owls had, it was useless against a tabloid with only a few employees. He feared death, and the people feared death, but they were willing to die together. He truly disregarded life and death for sales. There was nothing Thea could do about it, so she could only be extremely cautious. Driving alone through the streets of Star City, she couldn't think of anyone to approach. Felicity had gone back home, Not to get married, of course, but supposedly to spend Hanukkah with her mother. She didn't have many friends in Star City. Well, she might as well go talk to her future sister-in-law, Laurel. Laurel was delighted that Thea had come to visit her. After a quick packing, the two women went to a nearby restaurant. While they weren't close friends, they had known each other since childhood and were incredibly familiar with each other. After a few polite words, they began to vent their frustrations. Thea finished sharing her troubles, which was certainly something she could talk about. Talking about her grueling battles in Gotham would have driven Laurel crazy. When the conversation turned to Laurel, Thea realized she hadn't had a smooth past 2 months. Thanks to the abundance of jobs Moira had provided, the slums had enjoyed a rare peace, and several troublemakers had been transferred, either overtly or covertly, to other cities. Without a leader, no one was causing trouble. Combined with her already swamped with new work, this virtuous cycle had naturally led to a lack of cases at Laurel's law firm. While this was good news for her, with her strong sense of justice, it was also a noticeable decline. 3 of the original 8 partners had already withdrawn, and the remaining few were pursuing their own ventures. The daily expenses, once shared by 8 people, now fell on the remaining few, nearly depleting Laurel's meager savings. Furthermore, Tommy, once a wealthy and powerful figure, had been elusive lately, and Laurel sometimes wondered if he had found another woman. Chapter 134 Exchange Meeting with Laurel. Today, Laurel was wearing a beige business suit, revealing her long legs and stilettos. Thinking of Tommy, who had vanished, her demeanor instantly darkened. She took a swig of the wine the waiter had just handed her. Could Tommy still be apprenticing with old Ma? He couldn't possibly not see his girlfriend, could he? Though it felt like she was being too demanding, Thea still wanted to ask. Tommy, haven't you been in touch lately? Laurel waved her hand away. Just when Thea thought she'd vanished, she said, just phone calls, but it's been a while. She squeezed her legs together under the table, her face flushing crimson. Thea's perception had evolved into psychic, making her more sensitive to changes in her surroundings. Laurel's heartbeat quickened, even she couldn't hide it from her. But this wasn't a sign of poisoning. Was this lust? He glanced sideways at Laurel's breasts. They were the largest he'd ever seen, conservatively estimated to be D-class. How could he console her with such unsatisfied expression? Let her go back and find a cucumber to solve the problem herself? That would be the end of their friendship. Unconsciously seducing the underage girl, Laurel, under the influence of alcohol, picked out a few interesting stories from her relationship with Tommy. After a man and a woman have an interesting encounter, they always go home and do something even more interesting. Inevitably, she'd spilled some details about how long Tommy lasted and what positions he liked. Thea didn't find it awkward at all. She was completely unfazed by her own mother finding a boyfriend, so this blood brother wasn't a big deal. She just felt that Tommy was a little overwhelmed and passive with Laurel. What about Oliver? What was it like when you were with him? Thea asked with a gleaming gaze. Ollie. Laurel clasped her hands together, as if reminiscing, a faint smile playing on her lips. He's gentle, strong, and always fun to be with. Thea rolled her eyes. See, that's why Oliver has slept with every woman in the series except her own sister. The problem lies in his strength. He's a one-trick pony. And always fun doesn't it mean he can be versatile and adaptable to different situations? Thea glanced at Laurel again. A lusty woman paired with a strong man. You two truly deserve to be the official couple. No wonder Laurel started to waver as soon as Oliver returned to the city. Tommy's inherent qualities weren't as good as his. Thea was already planning to finish the campaign and head to Purgatory Island. Regardless of Oliver's own feelings, at least give him a chance to go home. And by the way, they could also save Yao Fei's daughter, Shadow, Yao Dong, a rare girl in the series who possessed that indescribable national temperament. Thea had a soft spot for her and was ready to rewrite her tragic death. Meanwhile, Thea accidentally glanced at Laurel. Her sister, Sarah Lance, should also be on the island. If nothing unexpected happened, they could all be brought back. Thea, do you have a boyfriend? Have you ever tried? Laurel was clearly a little drunk and staggering. Suddenly, it felt a bit unfair for her to speak alone. You should speak too, she thought. If you're not good at it, I can teach you. Her tone unconsciously carried a hint of experience, a senior imparting experience to the younger. Ouch! Thea immediately understood what she meant and facepalmed. I can scare the hell out of you when I'm having fun. Do you think my clone skills are just a joke? Same body, Same mind, combined with pleasure from different perspectives, the sensory stimulation is doubled. Let me tell you, even I'm afraid of my own dirty work. Although it initially just meant to test the limits of her skills, the subsequent developments were indeed somewhat jarring. Thea kept this secret to no one, fearing that her ancestor, Merlyn, would find out and send her a fireball from the higher dimensional universe. What you're doing is just piston friction on the physical level. I've already entered the age of magic. As long as my magic power is further strengthened, having 2 or even 3 clones won't be a problem. Laurel, you can't possibly fight Oliver and Tommy with Sarah, right? Feeling her thoughts were running wild, almost reaching Mars, Thea quickly collected her thoughts. She knew she wasn't that filthy. This was all a side effect of blood purification. That's exactly what she was thinking. Just as she was about to fabricate a fictitious boyfriend to deal with Laurel, the familiar crack of an M1911 pistol reached her ears. She instantly grabbed a fork from the table, ready to throw it at the slightest sign of danger. From today on, this bar is under the protection of the Pottingle family. A burly, bearded man, accompanied by 2 rifle-toting minions, entered the bar. Seeing his intimidation working, his eyes, wide as bells, scanned the area, searching for someone to further assert his authority. What a travesty. This guy must be a protection racket. Not wanting to get involved in such a mess, Thea secretly cast a spell, a variation of the dream spell. It reduced his presence to a certain degree, effectively making him invisible unless there was a deep-seated feud. She'd learned this spell a while ago but never had the chance to use it. It couldn't be used during an election campaign. With a living person standing in front of everyone, no amount of magic would make him invisible. She traced 2 inscriptions in the air with her fingers and silently chanted a spell. She felt a small amount of her magic power disappear, knowing the spell had been cast successfully. She could only wait to see how it worked. Come here, the bearded man, paying no attention to Thea, grabbed a boy dressed as a waiter nearby. With a smirk on his face, he said, "What family did I say I was from?" "Repeat it." The boy was terrified. How could he even remember which family he came from? He tried to recall, but fear filled his mind, and he trembled, unable to remember. His reaction was exactly what the bearded man had planned. He was going to make an example of someone and make an example of him, to deepen the impression on these people. He raised his wrist and pointed the gun at the waiter's head. "Can't remember?" Haha. Looking at the bearded man, his yellow teeth bared, his unconcerned demeanor, Thea felt a little disgusted. These guys must be the new members of the Pottingle family. They were so unruly and barbaric. She carried a pistol in her handbag. With her speed, it would be effortless to take down these 3 guys. But with so many people present, if she rashly opened fire, the follow-up would be very troublesome and might even affect Moira's campaign to a certain extent. Seeing that the waiter was about to be killed on the spot, what should she do? She secretly hated that the heroes of Star City were really not good at learning from the advanced experiences of their sister cities. Why didn't a masked hero stand up? It will be released tomorrow, and there are too many to post in the morning, so it will be released tomorrow afternoon. Please subscribe, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 135 Black Arrow II? Be careful, stay hidden, and don't come out, Laurel whispered to Thea, just as she was secretly hating the lack of heroes in Star City. Then, fearlessly standing up, she didn't care about her own meager strength, shouting, "Stop!" Suddenly, Laurel, beaming with righteousness, became the center of attention, and Thea nearly fainted. Sure enough, she wasn't the pure hero of justice, the valiant and confident person beside her was. Thea looked at Laurel with dismay. "Can those few wolf fighting techniques your father taught you handle these 3 gangsters? You're jumping out without even thinking carefully. That was too foolish. No wonder the villains always managed to scheme against the heroes. It was all because of you, the righteous heroines, that they were leading her into this trap." She couldn't just stand by and watch Laurel get beaten to pulp. After all, she was a friend. If she didn't have the ability, it was fine. If she did, she'd just take the blame. She hadn't expected to be treated like the hero today. Cursing inwardly, she clutched her fork, ready to strike first and eliminate a bearded man in the lead. When the bearded man saw that it was Laurel, the blonde beauty, stepping forward, he turned and flashed a lewd grin at his 2 men. He removed the pistol he'd aimed at the waiter and pointed it at Laurel from a distance. "Beautiful lady, are you talking to me? Can you scream a little louder?" He then thrust his back a few times, laughing as his men cheered him on. What a scumbag! Thea shifted her gaze from his eyes to his mouth, intending to teach him how to speak with a fork. Laurel wasn't yet the black canary she'd become. She'd just graduated from college and started working, a fairly inexperienced newcomer. Facing the armed criminals, her calves trembled. But she held herself together, facing the bearded man with unwavering determination. The lack of the panic he'd imagined made the bearded man somewhat displeased. He raged, ready to fire at Laurel. Now, Thea was ready to strike, but just as her fork was about to slip from her hand, her powerful mental power detected something unusual and she involuntarily pulled it back. A dark, feathered arrow whizzed into the bearded man's shoulder, and the shot aimed at Laurel, as expected, missed. Who is it? She wasn't the only one using a bow and arrow these days. Thea quickly looked in the direction of the arrow, nearly biting her tongue. The man was of medium build, wearing a black coat and a black hat that covered most of his face. He stood against the wall like a hermit, holding a black recurve bow that looked very familiar to Thea. Malcolm? Why would he come to save Laurel? But a closer look revealed that his attire was slightly different from that of Malcolm. Instead of the traditional black combat uniform of the League of Assassins, he wore what looked like a specially crafted black leather jacket. The man in black seemed nervous. After meeting Thea's gaze, he quickly looked away and shouted to the two women, "Run!" The bearded man was struck by an arrow and panicked, ordering his men to open fire. The men, now aware of the black-clad, black-hooded figure, unleashed a hail of bullets from their automatic rifles. Then, as Thea watched in horror, the elegant man in black was struck by a stray bullet, falling headfirst from the corner. Ouch! This guy's definitely not Old Ma. At a distance of over 100 meters. Anyone with even a little dodging experience wouldn't have been hit, but regardless of whether she was one of them, Thea couldn't stand to see him get killed. He flung a fork into the bar's headlight. Using a gun would easily reveal him, as the smoke and bullet marks would easily reveal his identity. But the fork was fine, it wouldn't leave fingerprints. Then, amid the chaos, Thea grabbed the slow-witted Laurel and ran. As they turned the corner, they looked around to see no surveillance. Under cover of darkness, they sent a clone to rescue the shot man in black. The clone, fully equipped with the original's abilities, shrouded his true form in a black mist. Under the gaze of a few onlookers, he grabbed the man in black and ran to the side. Reaching a quiet spot, they lifted his hood. Despite some initial preparation, Thea burst into laughter upon seeing his face. Wasn't that her brother Tommy? It looked like he'd made some progress in his training with Old Ma judging by his attire. Was he determined to become the next Black Arrow? Rolling her eyes, she guessed a little of the truth. This guy probably secretly protected Laurel every day. He hadn't really wanted to show up, but he hadn't dared to act out today, seeing Laurel's situation was critical. What a love-struck bastard. She examined his wound. The bullet hole was in his lower abdomen. There were no surgical facilities nearby, so Thea had no choice but to carry him back to their secret base. Fortunately, Felicity wasn't around lately, so there was less talk. Then came the familiar process: disinfection, anesthesia, bullet removal, and suturing. Seeing her brother, a rookie hero with only mediocre martial arts skills, suddenly come out to save the girl, Thea was at a loss for words. If she hadn't been there tonight, this rookie would have been taken down by a few thugs. Old Ma would have gone crazy if he knew the truth. With a sigh, she put his coat on. It was worth mentioning that the boy had lost a lot of weight after training for a few months. While he wasn't as good as Oliver, who used the salmon ladder as a daily exercise, he had gained a bit of masculinity. "Who are you?" Tommy, bleeding profusely, was half-conscious. He could only sense a shadowy figure trying to heal him. Still somewhat alert, he immediately reached for Thea's arm. Thea was a formidable martial artist, so how could she be so easily caught? But fearing to injure her wound, she didn't struggle. His question was a bit confusing, but after much deliberation, she decided to remain silent, fearing he'd ask her questions. She engaged in a few casual conversations in Chinese. To Tommy, who had barely graduated from elementary school, this sounded like a percent to an M, and what the hell? Undeterred, he continued to probe Thea. The two of them engaged in a long, illogical conversation, ultimately ending with Tommy losing consciousness. Thea wiped the non-existent sweat from her forehead. It wasn't easy to trick someone. She picked up Tommy's bow and arrow and examined it. It was the same model as Lao Ma's, but the draw weight was lower. After all, he was his son. He hadn't given her a souvenir after graduation, other than giving her a swollen face. She automatically forgot about the time she'd stabbed her father in the waist, and completely forgot about the necklace. While Tommy was unconscious, she carefully felt his bloodline, but besides the confirmation of their blood relationship, she couldn't sense anything else. It didn't feel like the same boiling blood she'd felt before. It seemed not everyone could awaken their bloodline, and Thea couldn't tell whether she was relieved or sad. Since the Merlyn bloodline gave her a role in the future, she felt an obligation to protect the safety of both father and son. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Fooling Malcolm. Silently feeling the lingering bond of family, Thea planted a message in Tommy's mind. Once they regained consciousness, they should leave the secret base and forget everything here. Fearing any strain on his brain, she used very subtle magic. After checking everything and finding nothing amiss, she dismantled her clone. Thea's original form was now sprinting, dragging Laurel along with her. The older woman truly possessed heroic potential. Despite her heavy weight and high heels, she managed to keep pace with Thea, albeit a bit unsteadily. "Alright, let's take a break," Thea observed, seeing her exhausted. Ever since consuming the green fruit given by the swamp monster, her lungs had become incredibly powerful. At this pace and exertion, she could run all day without feeling tired. Laurel, breathless, heard the call to rest, but didn't immediately sit down. Instead, she looked back, relieved to see no pursuers. "You've got great stamina, Thea." After a short rest, the observant Laurel immediately noticed something was amiss. She was so exhausted her tongue was hanging out, while Thea beside her appeared unfazed. Thea could only steer the conversation back to her regular exercise routine and her family heritage. "Look at how fit and strong Oliver is, it's all inherited from his parents," she said, giving Laurel a look that said, "You know what I mean." Laurel, now mostly sober and less exuberant than before, hadn't grasped the difference between the two. She nodded sheepishly, dropping the subject. The two women discussed Star City's recent security issues. Meanwhile, Thea's clone's consciousness returned to her original form, revealing the entire situation. "Do you know who shot that arrow?" Thea lowered her voice, as if there were some profound secret. Laurel looked puzzled. "How would I know? I didn't see anything clearly, I just remember being terrified, and then that bearded man suddenly fell to the ground, and then everything went black, and you pulled him out." Laurel folded her arms, looking up at a 45-degree angle, contemplating the truth. This is the quintessential heroine at work. After being rescued by the hero, her curiosity soars. She's driven to discover who the masked hero is. From there, she's on a quest for her own demise, with characters like Lois Lane and Iris West being prominent examples. Thea glanced at the deep cleavage her hugged breasts created. Was this a show of force? There's only one truth, and I won't tell you. You can guess. The next day, Thea accompanied her for another day, said hello to her mother, and arrived at Merlyn Group near dusk. "Hi, Thea." Tommy, sitting outside the CEO's office, greeted her despite his lack of energy. Thea scanned her brother with her mental power. He'd recovered well. The small amount of mental power she had left had completely dissipated, either taking effect or being wiped out by a higher power. Thea suspected it was the former. "Why are you so mentally ill?" she asked knowingly. Tommy, looking a little embarrassed, replied sheepishly that he hadn't rested well. Thea, completely unconcerned, leaned against his desk. "What's going on between you and Laurel?" "I talked a lot with her yesterday." They had indeed talked a lot, mostly about things not suitable for children. Tommy hadn't yet realized that his dark past was known to the unscrupulous black woman. Hearing her talk about his girlfriend brought back memories of the conversation between him and Malcolm when he learned he was about to go on a heroic mission. Malcolm's message was straightforward: if you want to be a hero, go for it, but be prepared to hurt those close to you. If you rush out without any preparation, you'll regret it and end up slamming yourself in the balls. As Oliver's best friends, they shared certain similarities. Whether it was their shared love for Laurel, a woman of unwavering justice, or their willingness to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, they both made the same choice: to stay away from their loved ones. Thinking of this, he looked at the graceful Thea before him, unaware of the truth, and secretly marveled at how much more beautiful his friend's sister was becoming, a sight he'd never seen before. To avoid implicating others, he decided to stay away. "I'm going to take care of some things. You take a seat first." After saying that, he picked up the documents on the table and walked out without waiting for Thea's reaction. His abnormal behavior made Thea stunned. Their relationship shouldn't be so cold. Why did she react so strongly when she mentioned Laurel? Or was there something wrong with the suggestion last night? Out of inertia, she thought that there was something wrong with the spell and didn't delve into the deeper issues. Shaking her head, she put her thoughts aside. She was just dropping by to see Tommy today, but she was mainly looking for Malcolm. When she got to the old Ma door, she used her mental power to search around. There was nothing unusual, so she pushed the door open and walked in. "What a rare guest. What do you want to talk to me about?" Malcolm was leisurely making tea. Seeing her come in, he poured another cup and waved for her to sit down. Thea considered her words and took out the necklace from her neck. "This is a gift from you." Malcolm, assuming she was going to return it, quickly smiled and said, "It suits you very well." Of course it did. Thea had already investigated and found that Malcolm did not possess the basic requirements for bloodline awakening. Returning the necklace to him would be a complete waste of money. The level of this magical equipment was beyond imagination. After working day and night on it, she had only understood the first 7 inscriptions. She could not deduce more on her own, which led to today's trip to Merlyn Group. "Do you know the origin of this necklace? Or how it came into your hands? Can I ask?" Malcolm's pupils involuntarily shrank. This topic was a bit beyond his expectations. But he didn't take it seriously, secretly laughing at Thea's youth. Impatience made him pour tea slowly. "Is there something wrong with this thing?" "Don't worry, drink the tea, and talk slowly." What should he say? Thea thought for a long time, but she didn't know how to start. It seemed that she had to reveal some of her cards. She'd thought about this before coming. Her battle in Gotham, especially the hours spent dragging Solomon Grundy on the run, had drawn thousands of witnesses, most likely Malcolm's. She had to tell the truth. Fortunately, while Malcolm was a villain, his evil was characterful and profound, not the completely heartless kind. He was kind to his children. In the original story, he bravely died for Thea with a smile. As a father, he possessed far more humanity than heroes like Oliver Dix. With a shake of her shoulder, Thea performed a dramatic transformation right before Malcolm's eyes. A translucent figure emerged from her shadow, its features becoming clearer in less than a second. Malcolm, clutching his teacup, exuded the air of a master, a gentle breeze caressing the hills and a bright moonlight illuminating the river. Suddenly, seeing the two Theas standing before him, he couldn't help but spit out his tea. "What's going on?" Malcolm, no longer concerned with his appearance, stood up in a panic, taking in the astonishing scene before him. "This is the adventure I had in Gotham. This is why I came to see you." The two Theas spoke one after another, their voices, tones, and temperaments identical. Malcolm couldn't believe his eyes. He stared hard for a long time, but couldn't see the trick. Chapter 137, Taken the Hook. Thea withdrew her clone, stifling her laughter as she recounted the general story. Of course, her story was 70% true and 30% false. She only mentioned being chased through the streets by Grundy, and then, in a moment of crisis, suddenly awakening certain abilities. The memories deep within her bloodline revealed part of the reason. Merlyn, Malcolm muttered the familiar surname. It was like living in the slums for 30 years and suddenly receiving notice that their land was slated for demolition. Excitement, confusion, and astonishment mingled, frightening the usually calm Malcolm. "Can I have such abilities?" Malcolm, desperate for power, fought back, but finally asked. Thea had anticipated this question, believing that any man would harbor aspirations for supernatural powers, let alone one so traumatized. She simply dismissed him with a single blow. "You have no abilities, and there's no hope in your life. Go play with your bow and arrow." This definitely couldn't be said directly. Family ties needed to be maintained, and one couldn't just casually say anything. Besides, Thea didn't know if someone like him could awaken their bloodline. Just because she couldn't feel it didn't mean it wasn't there. It was like in cultivation, even if she had dual spiritual roots of above-average quality, she could establish her foundation with a little opportunity. Old Ma and Tommy were like mixed spiritual roots, making cultivation incredibly difficult. It wasn't impossible, it was just that they didn't know the method. Unwilling to let his hopes be dashed, Thea considered her words. I'm not sure about that either. The memories in my bloodline are too few. I haven't even mastered the basics. I can only say there's hope. Malcolm turned around a few times, pointing at the necklace in her hand. What effect does this thing have, or what have you discovered? Thea was quite proud of herself when she mentioned this. She had at least figured out a small part of the story, even through some guesswork. According to what I understand, the world is composed of 4 elements: earth, fire, water, and wind. Light and darkness were added after creation. This necklace encompasses the 2 forces of Feng Shui. My personal attributes lean towards fire and wind, so I can only interpret the wind aspect. Malcolm folded his shoulders, his eyelids drooping as he listened to her rant. Isn't the material world made of atoms? Won't your physics teacher beat you to death? But considering the terrifying clone technique he had just used, he didn't respond, waiting for her to continue. The Merlyn family's primary bloodline is wind attributed, so this part is explained most clearly in my memory. Let me give it to you, Thea said, grasping the necklace with her left hand while her right hand carved intricate inscriptions into the air. The complexity of the spell was beyond her ability. It took her 30 seconds to complete the 7 inscriptions, draining her own magic power instantly. And that was with the help of the necklace's magic power. Her current accumulated magic power was far from enough to cast the spell on her own. Malcolm looked at the green wind swirling around Thea's fingers. Before he could ask, Thea pointed at him from a distance. A pale green energy instantly enveloped him. Had he not known Thea wouldn't harm him, he would have nearly jumped. He raised his hands, watching the transparent light flicker across his arms. Is this magic? This wasn't even close. Thea chuckled mischievously. Wind walk. Take a few steps and see for yourself. The stern-faced old Ma ignored her teasing and took a step, seemingly composed. Bang! Malcolm's step wasn't a big deal, but it was unexpectedly light, causing his left foot to miss. To avoid embarrassment in front of his daughter, he used all his strength to try to regain his balance with his right foot. But the impact of that kick was too much, and he lost his balance. Like a rocket, he slammed headfirst into the 5-meter-high ceiling with a resounding thud. Rubbing his head, Malcolm felt his face twist in pain. Watching Thea pounding the ground with joy, he felt a deep sense of frustration. Fortunately, he was indeed quite skilled. After moving around the room a few times, he gradually became familiar with the changes in his body. So light, I can hardly feel the weight of myself. He was now running at a furious pace across the spacious CEO's office, occasionally even running up the walls, something he had never been able to do before. This only made him yearn for this kind of power even more. How long does this spell last? Old Ma was running with such joy that a smile finally broke out on his usually gloomy face. This speed is far inferior to the Flash's, wouldn't you go crazy? Thea expressed contempt for her father's surprise. It works on me for about half an hour. I don't know how it would work on you. Why the difference? Old Ma couldn't help but wonder, could it be that his own aptitude was so poor that the magic power consumption was so high? In fact, his guess was almost correct, and Thea didn't bother to explain it in detail, vaguely saying that the spell was just like that, and if you were angry, you could bite it. 15 minutes, Thea observed the green light surrounding Malcolm disappear completely, and noted the data. It seems that the duration of a spell applied to someone other than the original body is reduced by half. Then, Thea naturally got to the point of the day. I'm not here to show you. Do you have any specific leads on the Merlyn family, any records of inheritance? Experiencing the wonders of magic firsthand, Malcolm was even more anxious than she was. He pondered his father, who had been dead for 30 years, and Thea's grandfather, whom she had never met. Had he given her anything before his death? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became, his mind a mess. Her father had died during the Cold War, during the economic depression. All Thea's grandfather had taught her was the skill of shoe repair. She hadn't paid any attention to it, and later went into shipping. Damn, could there be any clues to the inheritance here? She vaguely remembered him handing her a shoe repair toolbox before he died. 30 years had passed, and who knew where it had gone? Thea watched Malcolm's face turn from red to blue, then blue to black. Fearing he might be losing his mind, she interrupted him. You need to think further back. When did your branch of the Merlyn family arrive in Star City? Do you have any relatives before? Can you contact them? Her barrage of questions brought Malcolm, who was desperately trying to locate the repair box, back to reality. He hadn't even considered the question. God knew how many relatives he had. How many in America? Tens of thousands at the most. What about those in Europe? It was only fair to say there were even more. With 1,000 years of separation, the workload would be immense. Seeing Malcolm's head bowed in thought, Thea felt secretly pleased. A large workload was a good thing. It would keep him from constantly dwelling on sabotage. He couldn't let him ruin his mother's political achievements. It was the same principle as dealing with Batman. Give him something to do to keep his thoughts at bay. Batman used responsibility as a constraint, while the old man used power as a lure. I don't know how effective it was, but at least I'd taken the bait. Chapter 138 The Ninja Master's Conspiracy. There's more, Thea began, carefully considering her words. What else? Old Ma's head was overflowing with clues, family trees, birth certificates, and the like. He wished he could break into every U.S. immigration office and pull out every file dating back to the founding of the country. Hearing there's more, he assumed it was information about a clue and listened intently to her next words. You know I've met Talia, right? I heard from her that the Ninja Master had ulterior motives in taking you in. Thea certainly wouldn't admit to knowing the future plot, so the blame was easily placed on Talia. She was hiding in the mountains anyway, and old Ma wouldn't go to her house to verify it. Malcolm's expression faltered at the mention of the Ninja Master, but he forced a smile. This is Talia trying to steal a trick. She's afraid the Master will cause trouble for her, so she's trying to divert the blame. Humph, Thea, you've been fooled. That's the downside of villains. They assume everyone has a conspiracy and are overly suspicious. So Thea had to resort to another drastic measure. Wives die and husbands die young every day in this world. Why didn't the Ninja Master choose someone else, specifically you? He saw you were attractive and dedicated himself to your cultivation, asking nothing in return? Don't you think there's something wrong? The barrage of words instantly broke through Malcolm's defenses. Subconsciously, he didn't think there was anything wrong, but Thea's words pierced his mind like a sharp sword. Malcolm felt a splitting headache. Countless thoughts flooded his mind, and long fragments of memory kept reassembling and shattering. A flood of sealed memories flooded back. He could only hold on to the desk with trembling hands to keep from falling. What happened? I just said something casually. Why such a big reaction? Thea was confused and wanted to help, but she didn't understand what was going on, so she could only watch worriedly. A full half-hour passed before Malcolm's frown finally relaxed, and he let out a long sigh. That old man, he plotted against me. Who? The Ninja Master. He hypnotized me long ago. No wonder I never thought of such an obvious flaw. Malcolm ripped open his tie with some resentment, breathing heavily. Thea now understood that this was clearly the work of the Ninja Master years ago. It was similar to how she had brainwashed Catherine and Valaki with magic, except that her method was magic, while his was something else entirely. So, do you remember what happened before? Why didn't you notice anything for all these years? I just remember being very vigilant at first, but there was a lot of incense in his room, and the smell was truly intoxicating. I don't know when I started to relax, or perhaps I just automatically ignored some of the anomalies. Damn that old scoundrel. Old bastard. Malcolm constantly corrected his memory, recounting his story word for word, constantly correcting words he felt were inaccurate. When he finally mentioned the Ninja Master, his lips began to tremble uncontrollably, and he mistook the window for some old scoundrel and unleashed a barrage of curses. You're not angry that he's brainwashed you, you're angry that you've been scheming for half your life, only to discover that you've been the one being schemed. Thea had recently read a lot of psychology books because of the suggestion technique, and by compiling various clues, she was able to analyze Malcolm's current state of mind. The Ninja Master's methods weren't hard to guess. They were nothing more than relaxing drugs and forced brainwashing. Veritaserum, in modern clinical medicine, is known for its relaxing effects, though it's now widely used by Secret Service organizations. An 800-year-old man must have a more potent potion. Thea waited for him to regain his composure. Do you remember what he did to you? Malcolm thought for a full 5 minutes before answering uncertainly. It seems nothing special. It's just that when we first arrived in Nandarbit, he handed me his sword and asked me to cut my palm to swear in. At the time, I had no martial arts skills, and I just felt dizzy. I always thought it was because I'd never seen blood. Could it be? As old Ma continued to recall the details, his eyes widened. Many clues he had previously overlooked surfaced. Connecting the dots, his intelligence immediately identified the problem. He began pacing the office, recalling countless details. That sort of is, Except for when I joined the gang, he never unsheathed it. He practiced with ordinary weapons. I always thought he valued my billionaire status, Thea whistled softly. The sword seemed powerful. Whether it was magical or not was hard to tell, but it was definitely not ordinary. In the original story, Thea was also stabbed to death by the sword, and her talent plummeted. Should he seek revenge? But thinking of the ninja master's unfathomable nature, he shook his head, thinking it would take time. Malcolm had regained some of his former spirit. Did he destroy or take away my bloodline? This was his main concern. Although he already had the answer in his mind, he still wanted Thea to confirm it. Seeing your future decline, he knew the answer was inevitable, but he couldn't say it directly. Thea had to give him some hope. My gift allows me to summon a personal unicorn from the upper realms. Once it reaches adulthood, I can merge with it, gaining access to numerous light-based offensive spells and extensive healing abilities. I'm not sure how effective it will be, but it should be able to repair damage. Thea's words were ambiguous, and Malcolm felt his entire worldview shattered that night. What a mess. A unicorn? His worldview was already shattered, so he wasn't afraid of further shattering. He confidently asked, "Can you summon it for me? Could it be summoned at night?" Thea had never tried it before, so she summoned it once, just for the sake of experimentation. The little unicorn, usually available at their beck and call, took a full 5 minutes to appear before them, puffing white smoke. Sensing the knight's discomfort, it signaled to Thea that it was unhappy. Thea held it, motioning towards Malcolm. With her recent daily support for Moira's campaign, various public events, and citizen gatherings, Thea had gotten plenty of sun. The little unicorn had grown considerably, no longer the palm-sized size it once was. Sensing its annoyance, Thea could only hold it with both hands, like a child. Sensing someone else nearby, the little unicorn poked its head out of Thea's arms and spotted Malcolm, not far away. PFFT, it spat violently at the sullen-faced Malcolm. Haha. Thea gave an awkward, dry laugh and quickly comforted the pet. As Malcolm's face darkened, Thea returned the little unicorn to its other dimension. Chapter 139 Target, Purgatory Island. Malcolm's face was grimacing. Pointing to where the little unicorn had disappeared, he whispered, "Could my bloodline also summon this thing?" Thea shook her head. He breathed a sigh of relief at hearing different responses from everyone. He didn't want such a silly, cute thing following him around every day. The little girl thought it was cute, but he, a man in his late 50s, couldn't stand it. It was too eerie. If he had to summon something like that every time he fought, he'd rather continue practicing archery than give up his bloodline. He couldn't afford to lose face. Thea spread her hands. You see, it's still small. A conservative estimate is it'll take 2 years for it to reach adulthood. Whether the bloodline can be restored or not can only be determined then. The unicorn wasn't just small, it was incredibly young. 2 years was based on Thea's intense sun exposure. Of course, there was more to becoming stronger than just one path. Continuing to tap into the power of her bloodline and increasing its purification speed would allow her to absorb more sunlight per unit time, resulting in greater efficiency. Fortunately, she now had some similarities to Superman and Supergirl. No matter how much sun she basked in, she wouldn't get a tan. With perseverance, this physique would eventually blossom. Sunbathing was relatively reliable. Just find a beach and lie down. Both the Quinn Corporation and the Court of Owls controlled a number of private beaches. But the moonlight absorption was the real problem. Who would lie out there in the middle of the night? It was completely counterintuitive. Anyone could tell you were abnormal, or perhaps a bit insane. The thought of this kind of enhancement made Thea scratch her head. She dumped a ton of problems on old Ma. These were long-lasting, protracted problems that would keep him occupied for another decade or 8. He probably didn't have time to dwell on the Star City slum destruction plan. Thea warned him not to make it public and attract the attention of the Ninja Master, then hummed a tune as she exited the Merlyn Corporation. Malcolm watched Thea slowly enter the elevator and disappear from sight. Originally, destroying the slums was simply a vent of anger because he had no purpose in life. Now, Thea had handed him a big cake, and his egotistical thirst for power crept up once again. He was particularly enraged to learn that he had been tricked by the Ninja Master. Ninja Master, he whispered, a name that terrified him. He knew he was being outclassed in every way, whether in martial arts, wisdom, or intelligence. He'd said Thea was a natural warrior, and wasn't he the same? He was a lone wolf, daring to take a bite even when facing a lion. He had single-handedly founded the Merlyn Group, initially operating as a shipping company. Today, the group has shipping points and warehouses in 2/3 of the world's ports, and his intelligence network is unmatched. But the task was also immensely daunting. For thousands of years, Europe and the United States had no family planning policies, allowing children to be born freely. The number of direct descendants today was truly unknown. Those who retained the Merlyn surname were relatively easy to find, but what about those who changed it? What about those whose descendants died out, but whose legacy passed to others? The situation was too complex and uncertain. Rubbing his temples, Malcolm looked towards the CEO's office. Tommy hadn't returned yet. Malcolm hadn't planned to discuss today's events with his son. He hadn't yet made any progress. He also felt his son wasn't particularly capable, his only strength being diligence. Exposing him to such things too early wouldn't be a good idea. He couldn't rely on a father-son partnership, and Thea was right to urge him to be cautious. This meant he would have to devote considerable energy to handling this matter personally. Without his subordinates, he would have to rely on a few trusted associates and his own covert investigations. Even Malcolm, with his unwavering determination, was a little shaken at the thought. The workload was so immense, so extensive, could it be completed in 10 years? He wondered if his father had taken 1,000 points of mental damage, but his unwavering willpower had spared him. Thea was happily packing her bags. She'd already informed Moira, but she wasn't going to find her brother. Her excuse was a trip to Hong Kong. Bringing Oliver back or rescuing Shadow, Yaodong, would both be arduous undertakings. Oliver was so stubborn, it would be difficult to convince him without revealing her identity. As for Slade Wilson, nicknamed Deathstroke, the man who killed Moira in the future, Thea wasn't sure how to react to him. Oliver considered him a close friend, and the two had been locked in a decade-long feud, never reconciled. Even though her mother was now alive and well, Thea still resented him. Oliver, for some reason, had almost forgiven him, but she was a woman, and had inherited Oliver's protective nature. You mess with my family and expect a good ending. Although he hadn't done anything evil yet, she decided to leave him to fend for himself on the island. There was also a magical item on the island worth her time. In the original story, Constantine, with Oliver's help, found it in the 4th year, the Orb of Horus, an ancient Egyptian treasure. While she couldn't fathom how such an Egyptian artifact had made its way east, Thea believed it must be a valuable find if the scumbag Constantine coveted it. As for the evil god statue that Damien Darhak later acquired, Thea declined it. It was useless. It possessed magical powers, but without it, it was useless. It was utterly useless. All she had to do was drag Green Arrow away, and the statue would remain in the cave. There was no need to touch it. The TV series description of Inferno Island was vague. One moment it said it was in the North China Sea, but the map markers were east of Japan's Honshu Island, almost reaching the Kamchatka Peninsula. Could it possibly be Chinese waters? The news media was stirring up trouble for ulterior motives. Then it was said to be in the South China Sea, on the route from Germany to Hong Kong, with missile interceptors planned. The information was so mixed and unclear that even the best geography students couldn't figure out its location. Thea did her homework, researching the Gold Queen's wreck site and the hydrology and ocean currents at the time, barely able to delineate a rough area. She ordered the Court of Owls to prepare a helicopter for her in Hong Kong. She learned how to operate various modern equipment from Batman. She couldn't say she was proficient, but she had no problem flying safely. Moira was somewhat immune to her running around the world. If you want to go, then go. After checking in her weapons, Thea arrived in Hong Kong on time on the flight that night. Familiar Chinese characters, familiar skin color, but the person was no longer the same. She wanted to find Yao Fei's other daughter, Yao Mei, but the court had little power here, and the few contact persons were not very capable. Thea had to give up and let Shadow find it herself. She vaguely remembered that the Sky Eye had a large base here. Thea acted very low-key and did not attract anyone's attention. That night, she drove a specially prepared helicopter into the vast South China Sea. On the first day of listing, please vote for me and recommend me. It will be released tomorrow morning, officially entering the second copy. There will be 3 updates per day in the future, and more updates will be added depending on the status. Chapter 141 Arrival at Purgatory Island. The South China Sea's islands are countless, making them incredibly difficult to find. Xiao's movements were also shady. Limited fuel meant she had to return to port on time for the first 2 days, whether for refueling or lodging, or simply to relax in the city. For the next 2 days, she grew too lazy to fly back and forth. She added 2 more fuel tanks, spent the day sunning herself on the islands, summoning the little unicorn for a walk. At night, she went out to search for the person, dodging patrol boats, fishery administration vessels, and maritime vessels on the sea, weaving around in circles. It was a grueling journey. I'm so sleepy, Xia said. Miss Xia, who wandered around like a thief every night, naturally lacked energy during the day. From afar, she watched the little unicorn, its 4 little hooves spread out, enjoying itself. It was incredibly happy with the fresh air and abundant sunshine on the island, enjoying itself quite happily. A thought suddenly struck Xia, and she whispered to herself, in the tone of someone who might be tempting a minor, come here, come here. In theory, they could communicate without any problems, but the unicorn was still too young, so it could only convey fleeting thoughts like hungry and feeling comfortable. Thanks to the intense sun these past few days, the little unicorn had grown considerably larger. If it had been the size of a hand before, it was now the size of a paw. The little unicorn hopped up to Thea cheerfully, thinking she was about to be given a treat. This creature, no matter what, was already enjoying the squid Thea had bought her at a Hong Kong street vendor 2 days earlier. Seeing the little unicorn wagging its tail and flirting with her, Thea's eyes flickered. With lightning speed, she grabbed the little unicorn by its front paws and lifted it up, lifting it up. Her eyes darted down its lower body. It was a little princess, which was good. If it had been a male, how awkward it would have been. The little unicorn kicked at her with its hind legs, but the distance was too great to hurt. Before it could spit, Thea quickly put it down and stroked its mane. Whether it helped or not, it was a comforting gesture. With a gender confirmed, the rest was easy. Time to give you a name, Thea thought, rubbing her chin. What? You already have a name? No, I have to choose it, Thea asserted her sovereignty with a domineering air. However, she was struggling to come up with a good name, so she simply. My daughter, the day you were born, all of Lordaeron Forest whispered the same name, Arthas. Is it a good name? Is it a happy name? Racking her brains, Thea couldn't come up with a better one. Slapping her thigh, she decided to use this. Despite the little unicorn's protests, she caught it and tossed it into the air twice, concluding the naming ceremony. Leaving it to play on its own, Thea found a well-lit spot to continue sleeping. Day and night, night and day. Her efforts paid off. And near dawn on the 7th day, Thea finally saw the vast island before her. It's so hard to find. No one told me there were such thick clouds and fog surrounding this shabby island. Xia was a little frustrated. She had flown over this area before, but the thick fog had made her ignore it. It wasn't until this morning, when the sunlight shone directly, that she discovered the island beneath the mist. The crescent-shaped island was covered in virgin forest. In its center stood a watchtower built by the ancient Han people. A ditch ran aground on the south side. It must be here that the Foot Basin Kingdom submarine, loaded with Mirakiru, ran aground during World War II. She checked her memory again and again, and it must be here. Xia had no intention of getting involved with Mirakiru's biochemicals. She didn't need the power that came at the cost of her sanity, but she wouldn't mind taking a few bottles back to study. The doctor who had been searching for the potion was also confused. This was Foot Basin Kingdom potion from World War II, a full 50 years ago. It's not that there aren't scientists 50 years ahead of humanity, but they're rare. As for those little guys from Foot Basin Kingdom, Xia really didn't think they were up to par. The court's augmented human experiments bear some resemblance to Mirakiru's. We'll give them a bottle later to see if there's anything they can learn from each other. Thea didn't rush over to look for anyone. The island was much larger than she'd imagined, about the size of a second-tier city. Oliver assumed they were the only ones on the island, but he was completely mistaken. There were people growing flowers, making medicine, digging holes, and treasure hunting. The chaotic population of mercenaries from various countries could number in the thousands. And if you leave today, I'll be back tomorrow. With a constant flow of people, there's no time to spare. It's just that the island is so large that people don't usually run into each other. She lowered her altitude, found a small valley, and landed the helicopter. This time, she pulled out all her equipment, including her skateboard and arrows. Her robotic arm, developed using Batman's nanotechnology, was usually worn on her left arm as an accessory. With a flick of a switch, it can arm in a second. At full power, it can exert a force of 2 to 10 tons. Its arms are constructed entirely of hafnium, a rare alloy used in Federal Reserve vault doors. This metal is heat-resistant and war-resistant, withstanding even high-caliber ammunition. It also contains 3 claws, a super-hard metal artificially synthesized from titanium alloy and a small amount of carbon nitride. These 3 claws kept 50 scientists from Quinn's Applied Science Department busy for a full month. The results certainly didn't disappoint Thea. After numerous rounds of experiments, she had yet to find a metal she couldn't cut, except for extremely dense and heavy materials like white dwarfs and neutron stars. She packed her bags and camouflaged the helicopter. Even if she was discovered, she could still fly back on the skateboard, though it wouldn't be as comfortable as flying. Without magic, flying onto the skateboard would have been difficult, but now a tracking spell was all it took to find Oliver, her bloodline. So far away, the magical guidance was intermittent, indicating that the two were far apart, almost beyond the limits of magical detection. After repeatedly confirming west, Thea flew low to the ground and off into the distance. The sun gradually set, its afterglow shimmering across the clear waters of a lake. A man and a woman stood face to face. The man's face was shrouded in sorrow, as if he were carrying a mountain on his back. The woman looked at him worriedly, her eyes revealing a touch of sympathy and admiration. "I just feel like this island has made me terrifying." The man's voice was low, filled with sorrow. The woman's bright eyes paused in thought as she scooped up a handful of clear water from the lake and applied it to the man's brow. "No island, no place, can make you what you don't want to be," but her words didn't dispel the man's discouragement. "So I've always been a killer," the woman framed her words. "Everyone has a demon within them. The Tao Te Ching discusses the relationship between yin and yang. Within each of us are 2 opposing forces, darkness and light, killer and hero." She stroked the man's face, her eyes filled with love. Unbeknownst to them, a burly middle-aged man not far away was watching them embrace and plunge into the water, his eyes filled with struggle and unwillingness. Chapter 141 Thea vs. Slade. Thea arrived just in time to witness this scene. She wasn't ready to go all out with a cheesy brother-sister reunion drama, but rather to test their caliber. She donned her hooded glasses. Although Europeans and Americans suffer from severe face blindness, and wearing glasses like Superman and Supergirl would obscure others, she still felt unsure. She also used black mist to obscure her face, making it hazy. Not only Oliver, who hadn't seen her in over a year, but even old Ma wouldn't recognize her in person. "That's not a good look. Be careful of getting sty." Thea's long-range infrared glasses instantly located the middle-aged man peering through the trees. Without alerting the 2 below, she circled around to the middle-aged man, teasing him with malicious sarcasm. The burly middle-aged man was the future Deathstroke, the current Slade Wilson. He was a sort of mentor Slade to Oliver, who was engaged in a fierce battle with a woman in the water. Burning with jealousy, she suddenly heard the words behind her. Without a second thought, she turned and slashed. "Your swordsmanship is excellent," Thea nodded. Slade wasn't a pure martial artist, but a mercenary. His swordsmanship was simple and swift, fully utilizing his unique strengths. His power and speed, combined with his height and reach, made each strike a powerful and commanding blow. Even if Thea were given a sword, she wouldn't be able to match its charm. Slade wasn't averse to using firearms. He could combine pistols and rifles with traditional cold weapons. But now, in Purgatory, firearms were unavailable. Fortunately, his cold weapon combat skills were not weak either. He excelled in the Filipino martial art of Kali, having mastered it to the highest level. The swordsmanship in Kali martial arts was only average, far from profound. However, this ordinary skill, grounded in his own understanding and extensive experience, allowed Slade to fully utilize it in combat. Thea was overjoyed. With her current martial arts skills, few could truly rival her. She couldn't fly to Gotham every day to practice with Batman, and today she was lucky enough to meet this unknown comedian, unknown martial artist. She didn't resort to magic or mechanical arms, only to her natural kung fu. Thea swiftly dodged the blow, unsheathed her sword, and thrusted at his throat. Slade hadn't expected this mist-covered figure to be so skilled. With such agility, he could only draw his other long sword from his back to block the swift blow. "Who are you?" he asked, bewildered. How could someone so skilled exist on the island? Thea ignored him, her long sword piercing his vital points like a snake. Annoyed by the lack of an answer, Slade, using his height and strength to his advantage, slashed left and right with his two swords, engaging Thea in a tug-of-war. Thea didn't follow Batman's extensive and erudite path. Of the 127 martial arts, she'd only practiced a few dozen. While her IQ was considered top tier, it wasn't at Batman's human limit. Learning too much would only lead to confusion. Batman's methods were tailored to him. So, she hadn't practiced Slade's Kali martial arts. She deeply despised the Philippines. Could such a poor country possibly have any cutting-edge martial arts? During their exchange, she relied on parrying and blocking to learn his moves and observe Slade's weaknesses. A veteran of countless battles, Slade naturally understood her intentions. But to describe him as tough and resilient wouldn't be an exaggeration. He repeated the entire sword technique twice, not even attempting to switch moves. His two long swords flew up and down, attempting to dispatch his opponent with maximum speed. Thea was amused. This sword technique was truly ordinary, and its creator was probably no match for Slade. Originally, it wasn't a sword technique, but a staff technique. In the remote Philippines, with its dense forests and near iron deposits, staffs were ubiquitous. Long swords? That was a bit of a joke. Now that Slade had forcibly transformed the two short sticks into twin blades, their power hadn't diminished, but rather multiplied. But that was all. After the Gotham War and Batman's tutelage, she was now considered one of the world's top martial artists. While certainly not among the top, seeing Slade's repetitive, back-and-forth moves, Thea began to utilize her formidable martial arts skills and agility, dodging left and right, attempting to disrupt Slade's rhythm. Despite his masterful Kali blade work, Thea quickly found a flaw. Slade used his left blade to protect himself while slashing across Thea's neck with his right. The move was actually quite clever, but the Filipino's short stature made it incredibly lethal, while Slade's height meant the strike was a bit high. Thea ducked her neck and easily dodged the blow. Without waiting for him to retract his blades, she turned and wielded her two-handed sword, bringing the blades to bear against a blade. With a soft shout, Slade's sword slashed through his long sword. Suddenly, Slade's hand felt empty, knowing he was in trouble. His opponent had been too cunning, wielding his sword silently until now, but now, with a sudden burst of force, he'd caught him off guard. With a flick of his wrist, Thea swung the sword in a half-circle, piercing his eyes. "Stop," a woman shouted, her tone urgent, yet a lingering gentleness and grace lingered in her voice. Thea had already noticed her and Oliver rushing over. Though they possessed the refined demeanor of the Wei and Jin dynasty madmen, they at least understood their surroundings. Meanwhile, Slade fought and shouted, a personal style, but perhaps also a call for help to join forces against Thea. Hearing the noise, the two men, unsure if they were done yet, hurried over. Seeing Slade's imminent death, Shadow, Yayodong, shouted, drawing her bow and arrows in an attempt to level the situation. Facing an arrow that was far superior in both strength and speed, Thea smiled faintly. She slashed instead of stabbing, forcing Slade back. She turned, aimed at the arrow, and extended her jade-white left hand, easily catching it. "Who are you?" Shadow, a somewhat disheveled woman, her hair dripping wet, had rushed out in only her black underwear. She was a little worried about facing a mysterious opponent. While she didn't know the League of Assassins, she knew how to catch arrows with this technique from her father, Yao Fei, and wondered if it was one of his enemies. Thea glanced at Shadow, still in her underwear, and was a little amused. Her eyes flicked to her little pigeon. Finally, someone younger than me. Surrounded by those voluptuous creatures like Laurel and Catwoman, Thea was under a lot of pressure. This girl looked well-proportioned, with delicate skin. She wondered how she'd feel in her hand. She glanced at Oliver beside her again, and to be honest, she was a little disappointed. His steps were slow and his eyes were vacant. Not to mention compared with a future Green Arrow, he was far inferior to Tommy, who was a rookie hero in Star City at that time. Chapter 142, Immobilization Technique. In truth, she had wronged Oliver. You have to remember, Oliver had been on this desolate island for over a year, spending every day with two old bachelors, Yao Fei and Slade. He'd practiced archery for a few days, but young people have too much energy to vent. Sadly, Yao Fei had recently passed away, and his beautiful daughter had taken over as Oliver's archery instructor. While it was a bit disappointing to Yao Fei's eager anticipation, it was always a delight to see a fierce old man replaced by a beautiful girl, let alone one as gentle as water. Oliver was even excited to see Esau, feeling that God had rewarded him. Today, he had been feeling a little upset, and Shadow went to comfort him. The two of them struck a chord, ready to bond over the lake. Just as the water was reaching the channel, Shadow heard Slade's cry and hurriedly interrupted him. The two rushed out to help. His mind was in a daze, his thoughts completely unfocused on the battle. He pulled out his pistol and assumed what he considered a fairly standard fighting stance, watching Slade from the corner of his eye, waiting for his elder brother's decision. Slade, unfazed by Thea, signaled to the two of them to surround them. While Thea felt Shadow was only slightly stronger than the League of Assassins' ragtag troops, and Oliver was a complete wimp, a three-man encirclement would still be a formidable challenge. Slade's battlefield instincts were exceptional, and he was a rare tactical master. A counterattack would be humiliating. He checked the time. It was okay, it was time for the yin mark to recharge. He shook his shoulders, and amid the stunned expressions of the three, a clone, identical to the original, emerged from the shadows. Throwing a bow and arrow to the clone, Thea pointed at Shadow and Oliver with her chin, implying that these two were hers. The clone, imbued with her skills and mindset, sighed, drew her bow, and shot at the stunned Shadow. Let's continue. Thea's original form didn't care if the others dropped their jaws, and continued to beat Slade with her sword in hand. A psychic, Slade was quite knowledgeable. Although he had never seen one in person, he thought the man before him resembled a legendary psychic, as he had never heard of anyone becoming two people through martial arts practice. Thea naturally remained non-committal. You can guess. If Oliver and Shadow ask, I'll explain. But you? Forget it. Although Slade fought hard, without the miraculous injection, he was still within normal range in all aspects. Facing a technical fighter like Thea, he was struggling. Although he looked impressive and shouted loudly, he was actually exhausted. Thea slightly distracted her to look at the other two. The clone's archery completely overwhelmed Shadow. If she hadn't wanted to hurt her, she would have shot her to death long ago. On the other side, Oliver, gun in hand, saw no one paying any attention. He gazed anxiously at the battlefield, wanting to help, but feeling the precarious situation on both sides, he hesitated. Help me, this is the real one. Slade, already completely at a disadvantage, remained remarkably clear-headed. Despite never having seen the clone technique before, he instinctively made the right call. As expected of a tactical master who had nearly overthrown the Justice League, Thea couldn't help but admire him. She probably wouldn't use that tactic in front of the enemy next time. She glanced at Oliver's firearm with a dispassionate glance. While not fearful, she wasn't about to play dodgeball either. She chanted the League of Assassins' famous motto, "Guns are toys for the weak." With a flick of her hand, a black mist enveloped Oliver. Thanks to her recent diligent practice, she had mastered the spell, which once required a dagger as a guide, and with the aid of her yin marks, it was even faster and more powerful. With the yin marks, she was now able to instantly cast black mist and suggestion, but during the day, these spells were difficult to cast and their effectiveness was diminished. While the ancients relied on the weather for their livelihoods, she now relied on the time of day for her spells, a rare occurrence. Anyone suddenly experiencing total darkness would panic, and Oliver was no exception. I can't see, Slade, startled, shouted, calm down. Don't shoot. He was closest to Thea, and Oliver had been aiming in the same direction. He feared a careless shot from Oliver might kill him. He had actually underestimated the future Green Arrow. His combat prowess aside, his mental fortitude was already showing the beginnings of a heroic spirit. After the initial panic of his first encounter with magic, Oliver quickly calmed down and moved a few steps, only to find that darkness was still all around him. He hadn't known that Thea's magic had been slightly modified, now targeting the enemy instead of a fixed location. The duration of the unit was partially offset by the target's body, but the effect was much greater. Hearing Slade's shout, Oliver shouted back, I know. I won't move. Finally, there was a positive point. Thea's impression of her brother's performance was somewhat restored. Since you're so calm, I'm sure the next spell won't scare you either, right? She hoped. With her left hand, Thea drew a few inscriptions in the air, then aimed them at Oliver's black mist. A beam of black light shot out. This was the spell she had memorized from the pile of parchments in the secret realm, the only one she had memorized. Originally intended to be a targeted immobilization spell, she adapted it to her own situation, using the black mist immobilization spell. Repurposing the target's black mist reduced mana consumption by more than half. Furthermore, the new spell circuit required only a minor modification to the Black Mist spell, making it safer, faster, and able to utilize the power of her own yin mark. Seeing her spell complete, Thea opened her left hand, aimed at Oliver, and swiftly grasped it. Oliver, groping in the darkness, was secretly delighted to discover he had regained his sight. Being blind was no fun. He had already planned to stay away from the mysterious figure. I can't afford to mess with you, so why not just hide? I'll go help the beautiful shadow, he thought. But just as he was about to move, he was shocked to find himself completely immobilized. Slade was about to call him up to help when he saw him gritting his teeth and straining. Thinking back to Thea's muttering, he was completely stunned. He was just a mercenary now, not the future Deathstroke. His knowledge of psychics was the limit. He had never seen or even heard of a more advanced mage. His first encounter with the supernatural, he was thrown into disarray. Thea found an opening and knocked him to the ground. Just as he stiffened his neck, ready to fight, Thea struck him in the back of the neck with a knife. Phew. With this nuisance dealt with, the rest of the process went much more smoothly. The clone shot 2 arrows to force Shadow back, handed the bow and arrow to the original body, and disappeared from the side of several people like a shadow. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 Oliver's Choice. Hey, Shadow ran over to Oliver, irritated by him posing like a statue in a temple. She gave him a normal push. She pushed once, but he didn't budge. She pushed again, and with a thud, Oliver fell to the ground like a log. Thea felt a chill run down her spine. She wondered if he'd gotten a concussion. If he went insane, it would be a real loss for the Justice League. She snapped her fingers, canceling her magic. Oliver felt like he'd had a terrible day. His beloved goddess was about to die, but he didn't get to eat her. The battle was so chaotic that he became blind, then severely paralyzed. Finally, the goddess threw him so hard he nearly vomited his overnight meal. But at least he knew there were still enemies around. He called out to Slade a few times, but there was no response. Panicked, he stood with Shadow, looking at Thea. Oliver Queen, do you want to go home? I can take you there. Thea didn't bother to waste time with him. Okay, if not, stay here. Thea was conflicted. His poor martial arts skills weren't a concern. Talia could teach him, and so could she. The key was his heart. He had no ambition to become a hero. Yaofei's first year of instruction had been a complete failure. As long as she revealed her true identity, he would definitely follow her, no matter what. But was that really his true intention? Without martial arts training, even if he remained a playboy for life, Thea could still take over all his work. There were only a few villains in Star City. They could be wiped out in a flash. But that wasn't the point. As a family member, Thea didn't ask him to save others, only to redeem himself. But that was easier said than done, and no one else could help him. He could only rely on himself, treading between self-affirmation and denial, to gradually emerge from his shadow. She couldn't just find a few bad guys to torment him, taking on any challenge, even if it wasn't there, and then creating it. It would be better to leave him on Purgatory Island and continue his destiny. After asking her questions, Thea stared at him silently, waiting for his answer. Oliver was a little dumbfounded because he didn't know that this question would determine his future fate. However, he was not stupid and immediately realized, "You were sent by my family." Thea nodded without saying anything. "I am your family. You sent yourself. There is nothing wrong with what you said. Is there such a powerful person in my family?" Oliver turned his head and looked at Slade, who was knocked unconscious on the ground. He used to think that Slade was as fast as the wind and as fierce as a tiger, and was about to become the best in the world. But now he was defeated by the master hired by his family. This made him misjudge the background of the Quinn family. I was about to agree, but after saying one word, he fell silent. Could he really pretend that nothing happened and continue to go back to Star City to be a playboy? Old Robert gave him a task. Did he have the courage to cut off everything and do it? "I think so," Oliver said, looking at Shadow, who was nodding beside him. He immediately realized, what about them? They're my friends, they have to come with me. Quite loyal. Thea pointed at Shadow. "She can," then turned to the unconscious Slade. "He can't. Why? Oliver felt a flicker of confusion. Thea considered it, and vaguely said, "This person will cause you indelible harm in the future. Do you still want to take him with you?" If someone had said that to him before today, Oliver would have spit in his face. But Thea's spells had shaken him so much that his worldview seemed to be shattered. He couldn't help but consider it carefully. But Thea's words were too vague. What constituted indelible harm? Was it a wound on the body or the death of a family member? The range was too vague, and Oliver couldn't think of the damage. He pondered over his memories of meeting and accompanying Slade. They had been part mentor and part friend for over a year. Slade was like a brother to him, though fierce. He had never heard him. "If you can't take him with you, I won't leave," Oliver said fiercely. He had a cunning plan. He fully expected that since the other party was a hired thug, they would at least give him some respect. Surely they would compromise for the sake of the mission, or at least negotiate with him? But unexpectedly, Thea nodded. "Okay, then." Oliver was stunned. "Why don't you stick to the script?" Under Oliver's glazed gaze, the mysterious man turned to Shadow. "What about you? Are you ready to leave this island? I can take you to Hong Kong. Your sister is waiting for you." Actually, Thea didn't know any sister at all. She had just said it casually, drawing on her impression from a TV show. Yado May, thinking of her twin sister, Shadow hesitated a little, but seeing Oliver's miserable eyes, she heartlessly rejected Thea's offer. Thea naturally noticed their brief exchange of glances, but didn't mind. "I'll stay on the island for a few more days. If I change my mind, then," realizing they couldn't contact her even if they changed their minds, Thea decided her pretense wasn't a good one. "I'll come back if I change my mind." With that, she threw a Batman brand smoke bomb and quickly vanished from sight. Slade, Oliver, seeing the mysterious figure vanish, hurried to check on the motionless older brother. Slade, with a fierce glare, sat up on his own, even without his help. While Thea's technique was flawless, she underestimated Slade's exceptional physique. Even without the Miraculous injection, his physique was at the extreme limit of human strength. A knife attack that could knock an ordinary person unconscious for half an hour had revived him in less than 10 minutes. He'd only been playing dead on the ground out of fear of Thea's immense strength. "Kid, was that guy sent by your family?" Although Slade wanted to make a ton of excuses, that the other party was a superpowered being, that he was being cautious, he knew in his heart that even without those factors, he couldn't defeat him. If two of them attacked him together, he'd be dead by now. But Oliver struggled to answer his question. Not to mention that he'd been away from home for over a year. Even if he summoned Moira, he wouldn't have been able to come up with an answer. Remember, this was a time when Superman was still struggling to find his place in the world. The Justice League hadn't even been a thing yet, and even government agencies like the I couldn't find a master of Thea's caliber. Oliver hesitated, unable to articulate his point. Slade, assuming he was being deliberate, snorted. He picked up his two swords, one of which had been severed by Thea, and felt even more annoyed. "That guy should have a plane or boat that can get him off the island. Let's go find them," Slade said to his two companions, his face full of murderous intent, half commanding, half asking. They both nodded in agreement. Chapter 144, Dialogue with Shadow. Find his tracks. Follow the footprints and you'll find his means of transport. "If you don't take me with you, I'll leave you stranded on this island," Slade grumbled, clearly having overheard most of their conversation. He didn't believe anything Thea said about the future, believing it was just an excuse to keep him away. But 20 minutes later, Slade, a self-proclaimed veteran of countless battles, was stunned. He could only find traces of their battle. Why were there no footprints? Could a living person have flown in? This completely contradicted his previous experience. The more he thought about it, the more devastated he became. His already shattered worldview was now completely shattered. After repeated scrutiny, it seemed only a seemingly nonsensical explanation for someone flying in the air made sense. The first step of his malicious plan to seize the ship, or plane, had been aborted before it could even be carried out, leaving Slade feeling uneasy. However, he still held on to a glimmer of hope for leaving the island and returned to consult with the two to see if they had any ideas. Thea hadn't gone far. She had someone else to visit or perhaps pay respects to a family member. After observing the movements of Oliver and the others and measuring the ocean currents at the time of the accident, they finally found a shallow, rocky beach where seabirds occasionally scoured the shallows for food. "This is where it all started," Thea said, dismounting from her skateboard. She surveyed her surroundings and soon found two rocky mounds on a rise to one side. The names Robert Quinn and Yao Fei were scratched on two wooden boards with a sharp object. Both Robert and Yao Fei were buried here. A touch of sadness washed over Thea, who pulled a delicate bottle from her bag. "Dad, I'm here to see you. This is the wine I stole from your study. I hope you." A sob choked her voice as she unscrewed the bottle cap and slowly poured the wine onto the grave. While this memorial service was somewhat Eastern, she couldn't find a salute or a priest, so she had to make do. As for moving him back to Star City, Thea had considered it, but after careful consideration, she abandoned the idea. Old Robert died with a desire to atone for his sins. He likely didn't want to return to Star City, the city that brought him both honor and shame. In the original series, Oliver returned to the city without mentioning moving his father back to Star City. Perhaps he felt the same way. Thea sat on the ground, took a cup for herself, poured a sip onto the grave, and drank from it herself. She lost herself in the past, the bright full moon hanging in the sky, its radiant light shone on her body, making her combat uniform even brighter. "Want a drink with me?" Thea had already removed her hood, revealing a captivated face. She gazed at the nearby shade of the trees with a playful expression. Shadow had been there for a while. At first, she saw this mysterious figure sitting at her father's grave, confiding something. She thought it was someone she knew, but soon she sensed something was amiss. Either his eyesight was impaired, or he wasn't talking to her father. It wasn't until Thea removed her hood that Shadow saw her profile in the moonlight. Given her seated position, she stepped out of the shade and tentatively asked, "Who are you?" "Thea Quinn, you've probably heard of her, right?" Despite some preparation, Shadow was still a little surprised, covering her mouth. "Are you Oliver's?" "Yes, I'm his sister." Thea gazed at the woman who had encouraged Green Arrow during his most difficult times, and sighed. Such a gentlewoman. Shadow's eyes widened. What she meant was, "Are you kidding? Is this how you siblings usually communicate? Just give him a beating first?" Sure enough, what the books say is true. The American people are indeed living in dire straits. Billionaire families are indeed more complicated than our own family of three. Thea saw her puzzled expression and guessed, knowing she was misinterpreting the situation. What he needs right now isn't family, but redemption, self-redemption. If he can get over it, he'll soar to the sky. If he can't, he'll achieve nothing. "So, what brings you here?" Thea briefly recounted her thoughts, only to remember mid-sentence why she'd come here. This place wasn't close to their current campsite. Of course, Shadow wouldn't say, "It's your fault for making me so upset. Slade and Oliver were having their own issues, and the camp was so dull that I came out for a stroll, and somehow ended up here." She walked over to Thea and sat down by Yao Fei's grave. 2 old men, 2 daughters. What a fate. She'd assumed Thea wouldn't understand her Chinese, but she was surprised by the strangeness. "Fate brings us together, even across thousands of miles." "Ah. You speak Chinese?" Shadow was shocked. Knowing Oliver, she knew their family wouldn't have much exposure to Chinese. Having her secret gossip caught on camera was embarrassing. Seeing her expression change from gentle and peaceful to shame and anger, Thea was a little amused, thinking, "This is just the beginning. You haven't seen Master Bruce. He can even sing boundless oceans, vast skies in Cantonese." Since they both know Chinese, communication will be much smoother. It's hard for Shadow to speak English every day to take care of Slade and Oliver, 2 illiterate people. 2 women on a deserted island. It's not appropriate to talk about cosmetics and clothes, so let's talk about something more appropriate, like Dad. "Aren't you going to move your father's grave?" Shadow, who believes in returning to one's roots, was a little surprised to hear that she had no intention of moving the grave. What could Thea say? Talk about cultural differences between the East and the West? That's a bit far-fetched and too broad. She could only recount her thoughts one after another. "What about you?" "I'm here in a helicopter, and I can help you transport him back." "I lied to you before, I haven't seen your sister. I only know she's in Hong Kong." "If you want to go back," Xiao's subtext was that if you go back and find your sister to bury your father, everything will be fine. "If you don't go back, there's no need for me, an outsider, to go through the trouble of finding someone for you. I can just find a random place to bury him, and that would be worthy of Uncle Yao Fei's kindness in keeping old Robert company for several months underground." This, talking about herself, Shadow was instantly confused. For her, burying her father and finding her sister were absolutely the most important things. Even if aliens came to kill her tomorrow, they wouldn't be as important as these two things. But she didn't want to give up Oliver on the island. I have something to say, but I'm not sure if I should say it, Shia said in a dignified manner. Shadow rolled her eyes. I've seen the TV show, don't tell me. Are you going to say that Ollie and I are incompatible? That's what my mother-in-law would say, right? It's strange for a younger sister like you to say that. Did you bring your checkbook? Hiss, you don't play by the rules. Shia was a little frustrated. This doesn't describe the country. There are so many family ethics dramas. Look at this person. He has a lot of experience. Today is still 5 chapters. Surprise? Happy? The author has been working hard to update. Please give me monthly votes and recommendations. There will be 5 more chapters tomorrow. Chapter 145 Shadow's Departure. Although she was halfway through saying it, Thea still had to say it. Clearing her throat, Thea said, Ahem, you and Oliver are indeed not suitable. Don't glare at me, at least not right now. Shadow's beautiful eyebrows weren't already raised, and she looked at her with some anger. She guessed that she couldn't beat her, otherwise she would have come to confront her this morning. Oliver and I are a match made in heaven. Is it appropriate for you, as his sister, to say that? I know you don't want to hear it, but I still have to say it. Did you notice the look in the eyes of that burly man carrying 2 knives? Thea said, gesturing at the 6'9" tall, bearded man. This wasn't a game, it was impossible to know the other person's name after just one meeting. At least Thea had to pretend not to know. He also has a crush on you. If you end up choosing my brother, then Oliver's friendship with him will be completely over. Have you considered this? Thea said word by word. Was there really a friendship between Oliver and Deathstroke? The subsequent developments suggest it definitely did. Even if Deathstroke killed Moira, in Oliver's mind, he was merely bewitched by the Mercury potion, and he was still his good brother and friend. It's likely Shadow was unaware of these words, and perhaps even considered them. When the choice finally fell to her, she was still flustered. After pondering the matter, she realized there was no perfect solution. This left her with only one path. She stood silently with her back to Thea for half an hour before finally making up her mind. Okay, I'll go with you. When do we leave? My plane's quite far from here. I'll drive over. You take your father out first, Thea said, jumping onto her skateboard. But she only flew 10 meters before turning back. It's a little embarrassing to say this, but my people are currently experimenting with human resurrection, and the success rate is only 10%. Are you ready to try? There's always a sense of guilt in experimenting on someone else's father. But Shadow didn't pay any attention to these details. Her mind buzzed. You mean my father can be resurrected? Thea had just thought of this just to give her more reasons to leave. She nodded and said, it's a biochemical experiment. It won't work on people who died of natural causes. Your father, isn't he? Of course not. A bullet to the head wouldn't be considered a natural death. Shadow's tears flowed uncontrollably. She would try even if it was 1%, not even 1%. Oliver and the rest of her life were instantly forgotten. No matter how good a man was, he wouldn't fall into her cup. No more thinking about it. Thea watched the drastic change in Shadow's mental state and nodded. Then get ready. Let's go now. The journey home was smooth. Back at their temporary residence, Thea called Catherine Monroe and explained everything concisely. This woman was very good at handling things, and she knew exactly what to say and what not to say. Thea's description of the Resurrection Project was extremely vague, leaving Shadow with only the assumption that it was a secret U.S. military experiment. This filled her with uncertainty, yet also a glimmer of hope. After all, with American technology so advanced, perhaps it could actually succeed? The court officials arrived quickly, and a private jet took Shadow and the frozen old Yago directly to Gotham. Before departing, Thea gave Shadow her contact information and warned her that the experiment was a complex one and that she should be cautious in her words and actions. Of course, playing dumb would be even better. Finally out, Thea, now dusty and grimy, emerged from the dirt like a miner. 5 days had passed since she parted ways with Oliver and the others and sent Shadow off. Since her brother won't leave, I'll go treasure hunting. She thought and acted accordingly. In the original series, Constantine would arrive on the island in the 4th year, searching for a treasure called the Sphere of Horus. But Constantine had come with a map, and with the guidance of Oliver, a local expert, they finally found the vault and recovered the treasure. Thea had nothing, and even asking Oliver was pointless. The island was too vast, with no signs. How could anyone know where the treasure was buried? She resorted to the crude method, sitting on the ground in meditation, using her powerful mental power to sense subtle fluctuations in the surrounding magic. Fortunately, the island was a node in the world's magic network, which enhanced her perception to a certain extent. Even so, it took her 3 days to find the exact location. Finding the location didn't guarantee the treasure. Constantine searched for the entrance and dug a tunnel. Who knew where his entrance was at the time? So Thea resorted to the even cruder method, a brute force approach, digging a hole. She pulled out the engineer's shovel she had prepared, equipped it with a robotic arm, and began digging. She dug into the soil, smashed into the rocks, and on such a deserted island, she didn't worry about being discovered or disturbing the people. 2 more days of work, and she had dug a hole 3 meters wide and over 50 meters deep. Slipping down the cave entrance, they soon spotted the treasure. The handle was forged from solid gold, 30 centimeters long, and crowned with a pale red gem. This was the orb of Horus, the patron god of the Egyptian pharaohs. It seemed so. Thea watched from afar. The imagined temptations of inner demons, the armored guards, were nowhere to be seen. The orb sat alone on the altar, like a watermelon in a farmer's field, waiting to be picked. Thea remembered that when the orb was lifted, a frame covered in sharp blades would fall from the top, but after a long examination, she couldn't discern any mechanism on the altar. Even if there was a mechanism, she thought to herself, she wasn't afraid. She checked the time, it was just getting dark. With a shake of her shoulder, she instructed her clone to take on the somewhat dangerous task. But the moment the clone placed his hand on the orb, let alone lifted it, the moment his skin touched it, the entire chamber collapsed with a crash, as if struck by an 18-magnitude earthquake. The clone barely had time to toss the orb to his original before a massive mass of rocks buried him beneath the ground. Hiss! Before Thea could even sigh, the chain of earthquakes caused the ground around her to collapse. Luckily, she'd been prepared, shielding her head with a robotic arm. The Kevlar Batman had gifted her was also top quality, allowing her to avoid injury. She then dug herself out using both her hands and feet. Damn it! There's not such a strong reaction in the show. Am I unconventional, or is it that I can't touch it with my clone? Thea couldn't come up with an answer, concentrating on her finds. The orb consisted of a gem and a handle. She didn't know if this ruby, the size of a child's head, had been used by a deity herself, but it was certainly imbued with magical power, a fire element that matched Thea's personality. As for the writing on the handle, she could tell it was a spell, but Thea was scratching her head. It was written in ancient Egyptian. Not only did she not recognize it, she was even more worried about finding 10 people who could understand it today. But it was a treasure after all. She could take it home and study it. In this internet age, what could she not research? Chapter 146 Sarah Lance. Initially, Thea was hesitant about finding the African evil god statue. In the 4th year, Oliver would help the eyes obtain it, and it would eventually fall into Damien Dark's hands and wreak havoc on Star City. Rather than wasting time, it was better to destroy it beforehand. But no matter how hard Thea sensed, she couldn't find any source of magic on the island besides the orb she held. Was it due to the different systems? Or was it that the statue didn't normally have any magical fluctuations? Since she couldn't find it, forget it. After all, there were still 9 years before Damien's nuclear bomb decimated Star City. The worst that could happen was to kill him beforehand. Her journey to Purgatory Island was more than halfway complete. The remaining mission was to rescue Sarah Lance. She had no personal connection with her, so her willingness wasn't a concern. Bringing her back to Star City would instantly elevate her reputation, that of her father, Inspector Lance, and Laurel. If it were too far away, Thea wouldn't bother going, but she was already on a ship on the other side of the island. It was a convenient opportunity, so she decided to help her if she saw her. Thea didn't hesitate. After days of searching for the orb, the island's surroundings weren't as unfamiliar as they'd been at first. She scoured the area and, taking advantage of the night, flew westward. Finding the person was a challenge, but a large, gleaming ship on the sea was easy to spot. This ship was privately hired by Dr. Ivo, who was researching Japanese biological weapons during World War II at Mirakuru. He'd hired a fleet of armed mercenaries to search for his dream miracle cure. Thea didn't bother to consider his initial noble motives, she simply knew he wasn't a good person. Using infrared remote observation, she saw a significant amount of thermal energy reaction on the ship, roughly estimating the number of people on board to be in the hundreds. Taking advantage of a break in the mercenaries' patrol, Thea landed effortlessly on the deck. The skateboard wasn't ideal for maneuvering in the cramped cabin. Swiftness was essential. She gently grasped the necklace Malcolm had given her and whispered the incantation. Wind walk. As the spell was successfully cast, a visible shroud of green smoke swirled around her. After adjusting to the sudden surge in speed, Thea was doing quite well. While nowhere near the Flash's speed, she was still reaching nearly 600 kilometers per hour. After a moment's hesitation, she returned the skateboard to her backpack. The ship's interior was confined, so she shouldn't encounter significant resistance. Using the stealth techniques of the League of Assassins, she followed the shadows into the ship's hold as several patrols converged. She stunned a lone mercenary, unconcerned about whether he would become an idiot. She unleashed her suggestion and dream spells, overwhelming him with her powerful mental power, deciphering his memories. Thea quickly grasped the ship's situation. The mercenaries weren't as numerous as she'd imagined, only 2 teams of 50 men each. Dr. Ivo had led a team to the island earlier that morning, leaving only 25 armed personnel on board. As for the thermal reactions Thea observed, most of them were prisoners captured by Dr. Ivo for human experimentation. Sarah Lance was doing quite well. Although Thea considered her looks only 60 points, Dr. Ivo, after years of adventuring at sea, was a true beauty. Amidst a wave of affection, Sarah became Dr. Ivo's personal assistant. Learning that the ship was short-handed, Thea naturally abandoned her attempts to conceal her whereabouts. Just a few worthless individuals scattered across the ship, what was there to fear? She summoned a clone and handed her a bow and arrow, her message clear: if they were seen, they would be killed; if they weren't, forget it. The original body drew its sword and dagger, and upon spotting a patrol from afar, it charged forward with a gust of wind. These men might have seemed elite to ordinary eyes, but to Thea, whose speed and strength, combined with her world-class combat skills, they were full of flaws. She slashed and stabbed left and right, each swing of her weapon knocking a sturdy man to the ground. The clone also drew its bow and arrow, unleashing a volley of arrows at the mercenaries who had drawn their weapons, preparing to retaliate. The battle ended in just 30 seconds. Xia shook the blood off the blade. 5 were killed by the original, and 3 by the clone. Not a single one can fight. The original self-satisfied rant drew a glare from the clone, who, bow and arrow raised, said, "Go and take on the monsters." I'm ranged. As if looking in the mirror, they exchanged banter and banter. Xia was surprised to find that the clone was much more active at night. It seemed to draw strength from the slaughter, its once dull expression becoming more lively. Does this mean I'm supposed to be a light bringer by day and a killer at night? My talent is truly bizarre. Will I really become schizophrenic after so much time? Then, another patrol was completely wiped out. Following the memories she had accessed earlier, Xia found the captain's cabin. The iron door was locked, looking incredibly solid. Xia couldn't go in and shout, "There's a delivery, folks, open the door." She could only unleash her robotic arm at full power and punch what looked like the keyhole. There was a crisp puff, but the expected earth-shaking tremor didn't materialize. The door, seemingly solid, was actually just a layer of metal, easily pierced with a single thrust. The kinetic energy of Thea's punch was so immense that it dislodged the entire door, including its frame. Ah! A scream echoed through the room. Sarah Lance had been sleeping comfortably in the captain's cabin. While the conditions here certainly weren't comparable to home, happiness is always relative. Compared to the experimental subjects waiting to die in cages, she felt incredibly fortunate. Dr. Ivo hadn't made any unreasonable demands on her, and even if he had, she wouldn't have dared to resist. She had thought life would just go on like this, but she was surprised to hear screams in her sleep. Initially, she thought it was a dream, but the strong smell of blood washed into her nostrils, and she knew it wasn't. Just as she began to panic, the screams faded, and only the gentle sound of footsteps could be heard outside. Just as Sarah was about to hide, a silver-white metal arm blasted through the hatch with a puff sound. As she watched in awe, it completely ripped it off. All she could do now was scream, countless movie clips flashing through her mind, Terminator, Alien, and the like. Of course, she wasn't playing the Terminator, she was the female protagonist in the show, terrified to the point of peeing her pants. Thea swaggered into the room and saw Sarah, trembling all over, Her eyes closed, producing ultrasonic waves. She was speechless. Am I really that scary? You have a really strong voice. No wonder you got the nickname White Canary. But I'm here to save you, okay, she said, retract the clone. She can't see these things yet. Hey, I'm here to save you. She waited 3 seconds, but Sarah didn't hear her. Her shout was so loud, it completely drowned out Thea's words. After all, this was someone she knew. Whether it was Oliver, Laurel, or Inspector Lance, it wouldn't be appropriate to just beat her up or kidnap her. Thea could only listen patiently to her shouting. She didn't know if the remaining mercenaries on the ship were frightened by her murderous aura, or if they were jealous of Sarah's sudden rise to power, now second only to the captain, but no one was prepared to rescue the captain's lover. They all hid in the corner, pretending to be dead. Chapter 147. A powerful enemy suddenly appeared. Thea found a chair and sank into it, legs crossed. A slight twitch of her lips twitched as she thought to herself, I'll ignore you. Let's see how long you can howl. Sarah Lance's mind was a blank. Suddenly, she thought of being dismembered by the enemy, then wondered if he'd pulled out a pistol. She was scaring herself, figuring she only had a few seconds left on Earth, so she had to make the most of them. She continued to scream at the top of her lungs. But when her voice grew hoarse, she realized something was amiss. After all, she could be a heroine in the future, so she had some basic intelligence. Huh? It seemed like my voice was the only one in the room. Where's the enemy? Stunned by my shouting? She cracked her eyes a crack. No one. The enemy's gone. Sarah Lance, overjoyed, opened her eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. But when she turned her head, she saw Thea sitting in the chair and nearly bit her tongue. You. Sarah pointed thoughtfully at Thea's face. At this moment, Thea removed her hood, revealing her true face. She probably recognized her. After all, her appearance wouldn't have changed much in just a year. But it was hard to say. At least Thea didn't remember her, and the other way around was probably about the same. Luckily, despite her pretentiousness back then, others had noticed her. You're Ollie's sister. Sarah thought the woman looked familiar. She slapped her forehead and tried to recall her. Finally, she found a clue from Oliver. Wasn't she his sister? As for her name, Sarah couldn't quite remember. She sighed. Thea Quinn, I'm here to save you. Your father and sister miss you so much. He reached out and pulled Sarah up from the ground. The woman looked short, but she was quite plump. Perhaps it was the excellent food on the ship, but she was chubby. Perhaps it was Thea's extensive training. A thin girl like her before would never have been able to lift her. Still lost in thoughts of her father and guilt towards her sister, Sarah stood up, only to find herself being dragged toward the door. Where are we going? Where are the guards? Don't worry, everyone on this ship is in hiding. Find my plane on the island and I'll take you back to Star City. Suddenly hearing the familiar name of Star City, Sarah's tears began to flow uncontrollably. Thea frowned slightly. This woman was quite emotional. Honestly, Thea was deeply impressed by Sarah Lance's future achievements. Whether as captain of the timeship Waverider or leader of the Legends, Sarah Lance was an incredible heroine. Her tireless efforts to rectify the timeline's changes, especially her words, "Legends never give up," were truly memorable. Contrast this with the Flash, who, solely to rewrite his own tragic childhood, recklessly triggered the Flashpoint event, rewriting the fate of countless people. Sarah's reverence for time was 10,000 times greater. But that was the future. Facing the stumbling, snot-soaked, tearful creature before her, Thea could only say that heroes are made by circumstances. No one is born exceptional. Heroes who strive to defy fate are the ones worthy of praise. After repeated tugs and pulls, Sarah finally regained some composure once she was truly out of the ship's reach. Her father's nagging, her sister's complaints, were no longer a concern. As long as she could get off this damned island, she'd be fine with a beating. Not far from them, a wave of aquamarine light rippled through the air. After a violent ripple, a man and a woman emerged from the air. The shorter, blonde woman was alert, but as she looked around, a look of disbelief filled her face. Purgatory Island, the taller man beside her, hearing her call, surveyed the area. Is this the Purgatory where Oliver and you were? Why did Gideon send us here? Shouldn't we be at the Star City police station in 2007? The two stood in silence, silently rising and walking into the darkness. What the hell is this? While Thea was installing the skateboard, Sarah's mind had returned to normal. Whether due to homesickness or simply to lighten the mood, she peppered her with questions, asking about Ollie's location and how her family was doing. Thea could only selectively answer a few. "It's installed, huh?" Just as Thea was about to jump, she felt a sudden throbbing in her temple. A strong sense of danger washed over her. Out of the corner of her eye, she could only see a streak of blue light hurtling towards her. "Get down," he pounced on Sarah Lance, who was still watching blankly from the side. The blue light missed them, but as Thea watched in horror, it pierced the skateboard. Oh my god. The skateboard, which had been suspended in midair, swayed like a kite with a broken string, and fell to the ground, motionless. "Fuck you." Thea's rage instantly filled her, and she turned to look at the culprit. Not far away stood a tall woman in black clothes, black hair, and a blank expression. Who was she? How could such a person suddenly appear here on Purgatory Island at this time? But before she could ask, the black-clad woman's weapon opened fire without stopping. Whoosh, whoosh, blue light shot towards Thea and Sarah. A laser weapon? Thea was bewildered. Such advanced weapons weren't available these days. The Bat Fighter was considered the pinnacle of human technology, but it hadn't even reached a laser age. Could this person be an alien? The situation was dire. Regardless of who the enemy was or where they came from, they were undeniably an enemy. Whispering to Sarah to hide, Thea raised her hand and unleashed a darkness spell. She didn't seek to trap the enemy, just to briefly disrupt their vision. Then, under Sarah's horrified, rebuffing gaze, Thea reapplied Wind Walk, covering the 100-meter distance in a flash. Facing the enemy, who had just emerged from the black fog, she raised her hand and struck with her sword. Her enhanced speed was breathtaking. After just a dozen or so exchanges, she was completely dominant. She realized the woman's fighting ability was far inferior to hers, at best a special forces soldier's. However, she possessed immense strength and a sturdy build, leaving only scratches on her flesh with her sword. Her body was so dense? Could she be from Earth? I don't know, she wondered. The woman opposite was also extremely surprised. She kept thinking in her heart, who is this woman fighting with her? It seems that she is not her mission target. Two people who should not be there at this time appeared in a place where they should not be, and started fighting inexplicably. This was completely different from her initial plan. But as the fight went on, her anger also rose. Xia's sword had cut her body with more than a dozen cuts. Although they were not deep, she was not a robot and could bleed. Relying on her own strength far greater than that of the Earthlings, she no longer pursued small fights, but used fierce punches. Seeing her change in attack method, Xia did not dare to take it head-on and deliberately exposed a flaw. The woman in black was overjoyed. She ignored the sword piercing her collarbone and punched Xia in the face. Chapter 148. The enemy was killed by Xia's punch. I've been waiting for that move. Thea's robotic arm was already fully equipped, hidden from view beneath her combat suit. She sneered at her supposedly effective punch. You're just relying on your strength, aren't you? I'll show you what science is. She raised her hand and delivered a punch as well. Seeing Thea preparing to meet a blow, the woman in black felt a pang of fear. Could this Earth woman truly be incredibly strong? But the arrow was already on the string, so she had to throw it with all her might. Bang! With a muffled thud, the woman in black felt an overwhelming surge of force from her arm to her shoulder. She was lifted off the ground and flung back over 5 meters. Holy crap! How can this guy have so much strength? The woman in black, a well-trained fighter, spun effortlessly in midair, regaining her balance, her eyes racing as she contemplated a strategy to defeat her foe. Thea was quite satisfied with the punch. She had used all the available power in her arm. While the design capped it at 10 tons, considering the way human muscles generate force and recoil, it couldn't actually reach that high. Still, the punch unleashed over 5 tons of force. The woman in black, while also known for her strength, was only a little over a ton, but not quite 2, comparable to less ferocious pain. Caught off guard, Thea's punch left her arm numb and weakened, reducing her strength by at least 20%. While Thea felt some recoil, the excellent shock absorption of her metal arm nearly neutralized it. She took a small step back, then, while the woman in black regained her balance, launched a fierce attack. Who are you? The woman in black thought, feeling the fight was murky. Thea immediately retorted, tell me who you are first. I have my reasons for not saying it. Tell me who you are. We must have misunderstood. The woman in black was already inferior to Thea in martial arts, and now she was outmatched in strength and speed. She was beaten like a dog to death by Thea. You realize you misunderstood now, and you're still shooting at my skateboard. You're even trying to lie about my name, for revenge later, right? I'm not going to change my name. I'm not going to change my surname. I'm Barbara Gordon. Thea said her name casually, without a trace of embarrassment, her expression completely calm. HU, thousands of miles away, or even tens of thousands of miles away, Barbara, unaware of the scapegoating she'd been given and still undergoing Batman's special training, couldn't help but sneeze. The woman in black was naturally not one for open-mindedness. She muttered the name twice, Barbara, HMPH, I'll remember that. Though she was furious, she couldn't defeat him. She didn't possess the protagonist's ability to recall past events, and even if she wanted to, she couldn't. Seeing Thea's vicious punch coming towards her face, she grew anxious. With that much power, won't this blow disfigure me? This was intolerable, and she didn't care about the organization's rules. Stop time. The woman in black raised her right hand and aimed it at Thea. An invisible presence enveloped the area where they were fighting. Thea remained in midair, her right hand in front of her, her left arm gathering strength. She was completely unaware of what was happening. The woman in black gasped for breath. She could only temporarily alter the flow of time in a small area. Stopping the entire world was impossible. But even such a small-scale stop would have a huge backlash. No one could cheat time, they were its servants, not its masters. She prepared to complete her mission and quickly retreat, but she discovered a shocking fact. Thea, theoretically frozen in time, was slowly moving. Though the distance she moved was infinitesimal, she wasn't completely imprisoned. This guy. The woman in black was completely stunned. This phenomenon only proved that the person fighting her was no mere nobody. She was a crucial figure in this timeline, with countless people coming into direct or indirect contact with her. These people, influencing even greater temporal fluctuations, created even greater temporal uncertainty. Rather than imprisoning her, it was more like vying for control of the entire world's timeline. Forget about herself, even if all the 100 or 80 members of the organization were pulled out and multiplied by 10,000, they wouldn't be able to defy these worldly rules. It sounded like a long time, but in reality, only a second had passed. But that brief second had already severely damaged the woman in black. Her once pretty appearance resembled a demonic ghost, and her body shrank uncontrollably. No, the backlash of time was unstoppable. She had to stop immediately. She'd rather die than resort to this tactic. But she had underestimated the tolerance of time and overestimated her own limits. She was barely halfway through her move when a massive burst of energy exploded from within her body, the swiftness and force of the explosion terrifying. Without a single grunt, the woman in black was instantly pulverized. This wasn't just an adjective, she was reduced to her atomic structure. However, because her bounding position hadn't immediately been lifted, some of the strange substances within her body automatically entered Thea's body. With the woman's death, her temporal position naturally lifted, and Thea successfully regained control of her body. But the scene before her left her bewildered. Although bound, her memories were still there. She saw her leap up and strike, and then the woman in black was instantly pulverized. Did I do this? Thea was bewildered. Did I hit her? Was she instantly killed by my own punch? Was she possessed by Sadama? But the enemy was indeed dead. While many villains have a tradition of faking their own deaths, giving them 2 lives as long as they weren't beheaded, this one was reduced to ash. It was theoretically impossible for her to be resurrected, right? Carefully feeling her body, she felt a faint sensation of something new inside her, but without a reference point, she couldn't discern it. Meanwhile, in the bushes not far from her, 2 people were whispering. What do you say? Ray, Thea killed the time traveler. She's taking my original body back to Star City. This is simply, what exactly is this? The blonde in the white leather jacket couldn't quite put her finger on it, the tall man named Ray said with a playful air. I'm a PhD in physics, not time travel, but this Thea is so different from the Thea we know, this was pure nonsense. The blonde rolled her eyes at him, knowing he had no constructive suggestions. As she was racking her brains for a solution, their intercom rang. Ms. Lance, Dr. Palmer, the timeline shows the time traveler dead. Did you do this? The voices, somewhat incredulous, sounded relaxed. The 2 in the bushes exchanged a wry smile. They wanted to accept the honor, but it wasn't their doing. Chapter 149 Legendary Team. The two of them discussed it, but neither of them had a good solution. They decided to go back and discuss it. But the moment they moved, Thea, not far away, sensed it. Even as a pure warrior, Thea was incredibly sensitive, let alone now that she had evolved into a psychic. "Who's there?" The sound of their footsteps instantly startled Thea. Relying on her wind walk technique, she darted in front of the two with the swiftness of a dragon. But when Thea took in their faces, she was instantly shocked. That blonde girl must be Sarah Lance, right? And the tall, handsome, and playful guy next to her must be Ray Palmer, the Atom? Why were they here? At this time, in this place? Thea vaguely understood something and used her psychic power to sense Sarah Lance not far away, the one knocked unconscious by the shockwave. That's right, two Sarahs. This one was Sarah Lance from the future. "Hi. I'm Ray. You probably don't know me, oh, at least not right now." "No, I mean, you shouldn't know me right now." Ray Palmer, a handsome, 6'9" man, ignored the air of mystery between the two women and greeted them cheerfully. But after a few words, his words grew increasingly absurd, and he stopped talking, still staring intently at her. This guy truly lived up to being Felicity's boyfriend, his playful nature rivaled hers. Thea pursed her lips and reluctantly nodded, turning to the silent blonde. "Are you Sarah Lance, already possessing the air of a future legendary captain?" Bit her lip and said helplessly, "Yeah, you. How did you end up on Inferno Island?" "I came to see Oliver," Thea replied with a firm, logical, and undeniable answer. Sarah had a slight toothache, so she couldn't fault the answer. Just as she was brooding, Captain Rip Hunter's voice came over the intercom. "Hold her steady, we'll be right there." Sarah and Ray exchanged glances, deciding that the Atom, the more talkative, would stall for time. "Hey, where were we?" "Oh, yeah, you don't know me yet, but you'll know me soon, blah blah blah." Thea didn't see their hidden glances, but she didn't consider them a threat. After all, they were on the same side. Ray had been Felicity's boyfriend, and Sarah was Laurel's sister, so she was somehow connected to them. Seeing they were trying to chat, she felt a little puzzled, but she still engaged in a rambling conversation. Unfortunately, Ray Palmer was the type who could talk all day but always faltered in the heat of the moment. He faltered after a few sentences. Thea saw his intention but didn't point it out, changing the subject to discuss physics, science, and nanotechnology. This brought a sigh of relief to Ray Palmer. For a quantum mechanics guru who could solve Ehrenfest's theorem in an hour, he could talk about technology for days and nights without repeating himself. What a genius. Many of his ideas, even if they were just general discussions, sparked a spark of excitement in Thea. He could be considered a less powerful Tony Stark. Their simple exchange was profoundly beneficial. Just as Ray was explaining a formula, Thea smiled and said, "Your friends are here, we mean no harm," Sarah quickly explained. Yes, Ray Palmer nodded, his voice timid. Whether they meant any harm or not, we'd have to meet them. As Thea watched the opposing team rush towards her without concealing their presence, a sense of disharmony crept in. Was she now so strong she needed a team? So happy? What a joke. Fighting these inexperienced and unreputable people. 5 people approached from a distance, led by Rip Hunter, captain of the Waverider, wearing a long, brown-gray trench coat with a stand-up collar. To his left was Captain Cold, wearing a down jacket and sunglasses, holding a slightly exaggerated gun. Next to him was Captain Cold's good partner, Heatwave, a tall, big-headed man in an asbestos fireproof suit, holding a flamethrower. To his right was a plain-looking black man with thick lips, whose name Thea couldn't quite recall. Next to him was a portly old man with white hair and round glasses. Is the entire Legends of Tomorrow team out? No, Hawkman and Hawkgirl should be included too. Are those 2 idiots dead or haven't shown up yet? Miss Quinn, we are not enemies. We hold no ill will, Rip Hunter said, speaking out his side's position. Thea believed this. Although her brother Oliver was a weakling now, his future reputation would still impress many. He was the 8th of the Justice League's 7. As his sister, she was undoubtedly well regarded within the Justice League. They wouldn't dare to harm her. Seeing she didn't overreact, Rip Hunter breathed a sigh of relief. Time travel inevitably involves encountering relatives and friends, and it's impossible to kill everyone you meet. If he did, the heroes of justice wouldn't spare them either. So, he was well versed in handling such emergencies. His side was neutral, even leaning towards justice, so he couldn't force Thea, who had close ties with Team Arrow. We arrived here from a certain time in the future, intending to stop the time traveler from tackling Miss Sarah's past, but we didn't expect to meet you here. I want you to hand Miss Sarah over to us, he said, gesturing to the unconscious Sarah Lance of this dimension in the distance. We can return her to her original time. Thea hadn't really considered the broad question of how time could change Sarah's fate. She pondered, wouldn't it be nice to send Sarah back to Star City, to her father and sister? Great, that was perfect. There was nothing wrong with that. From every perspective, Purgatory Island was the starting point of Sarah's tragic fate. If it could be rewritten from the source, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But Rip Hunter couldn't say that. People's perspectives dictate their perspectives. For Sarah, reversing everything would be a positive thing, even a truly joyous one. She could return home and live a happy life. Who would want to endure so much suffering? But for Rip Hunter, it was a dilemma. Sarah was his top talent, intelligent, promising, and decisive. But all of this stemmed from the suffering she endured. If he agreed to let her go, she wouldn't have had the experience. Would recruiting her be asking for trouble? Rip swore to heaven. If he let her go, the capable blonde before him would instantly transform into a frail young woman, changing boyfriends twice a month, enjoying a few weekends, and partying whenever she wanted. This was the norm for young American men and women. If Sarah's life continued as it was, it wouldn't be surprising if she remained like that. But he couldn't say a word. It all depended on Sarah's own wishes. Whether his right-hand woman chose the present or returned to the past was entirely up to her. Chapter 150 vs. Legendary Team. The final decision fell back on Sarah, of course, the future version of Sarah before them. The unconscious figure in the distance was automatically ignored by the others. What should she do? Even Sarah, known for her exceptional decisiveness, hesitated. A nod would end all suffering and allow her to return to her daily routine. Be damned to the Assassin's League and the Legends. A shake of the head would keep everything the same, and she would have to continue struggling in the sea of suffering. There was a moment of silence. Those who understood bowed their heads in thought, wondering what they should do when the question fell upon them. Those who didn't understand glanced around, wondering why no one spoke. Sarah began, trailing off, perhaps even in a state of deep hesitation. You shouldn't be a weakling, Sarah Lance. You are a killer, an assassin, a fighter against fate. Consider the true meaning of your existence, Captain Cold, Snart, spoke in a shrill, drooping voice beside her. His words subtly shifted the balance of power, Sarah's expression shifting from hesitation to determination. She closed her eyes, her voice tinged with pain. You're right. That's my fate. I shouldn't run away from it. Thea couldn't help but glance at the man who suddenly interrupted. His demeanor was sinister, and it made Thea feel uneasy. She hadn't expected him to understand Sarah so well. She'd been under the impression that these two, one gay and the other lesbian, had somehow developed a connection. It was unbelievable that they'd already connected so well. Since you've chosen this path, I can't drag you back, Thea nodded, indicating that they could resolve it on their own. With one problem solved, Rip Hunter, sporting a handsome beard, felt relieved, but a new one immediately emerged. He reached out and took out a capsule from his arms, and said embarrassedly, Miss Quinn, we are time travelers. You will know us in the future, but not now, so you must take the pills to forget what happened today. Haha, Shia covered her mouth and laughed at them. Do you think I'm a soft persimmon because you think I'm easy to talk to? Time traveler? I'm so scared, it's hilarious. Shia laughed so hard, but in the puzzled eyes of several people, her face turned pale in an instant. Are you sure you can eat me? Rip Hunter tried to make a final mediation. We don't want to be your enemy, but this is our rule. Huh? Shia snorted heavily. Do you give medicine to everyone you meet? How is this possible? Ours is a time-traveling spaceship, not a pharmaceutical processing plant. If we give a pill to everyone we see, and work 3 shifts every day, we won't do anything else. Rip Hunter shook his head. We don't want to do this. We respect Green Arrow, but you have to understand there are 7 of us. Hearing his subtly threatening words, Thea sneered. 7, so what? He drew his bow and arrow, aiming at the threatening Rip Hunter. He spoke beautifully about saving world peace, but in reality, it was all about saving his wife and children. Saving his wife and children wasn't shameful, it was noble. But to conceal this fact, he presented himself as the savior of the world, which was a bit disgusting. Perhaps he himself didn't realize the hypocrisy of his words and actions. With her obvious move to use force, the others were forced to join the fray. "What are her abilities?" Captain Lang whispered sinisterly to Sarah Lance, a supposed acquaintance of Thea's. She was the one that had the most experience with Team Arrow. "She's Malcolm's daughter, and her training is similar to mine." Sarah had witnessed Thea's fight with a time traveler, but she was a bit far away, and Thea didn't display much extraordinary strength, so she could only describe it based on her past impressions. "So that's just an ordinary person with extraordinary skills." Heatwave shook his head, his face full of disdain. Rip Hunter whispered, "Don't hurt her, she's an important figure in the timeline. Don't worry, we can take her out with our fists and feet." The ice and fire duo silently sheathed their weapons and rushed out. The rest of the group followed suit and ran towards Thea. As they ran, they also changed their costumes. Ray Palmer pulled a small box from his chest, and the Atom suit instantly expanded, donning it. The black guy and the plump old man clasped their right hands together, merging into the superhero firestorm. Although Sarah didn't want to antagonize Thea, she still took out her iron rod and pretended to run. Thea was speechless at their formation. 7 people, well, one merged, so now there were 6. 6 men, like European soldiers from the Matchlock era, lined up and ran towards them. From a visual perspective, they were indeed quite intimidating, charging forward with the force of a tiger descending from a mountain or a dragon emerging from the sea. But this isn't a photography competition, this is a fighting match. With you all standing so closely together, Thea felt embarrassed to attack. But, determined not to take advantage, Thea decided to teach them a lesson. The lesson was titled, "Mom, we won't crowd together again next time." Her right hand released the bowstring, and several mysterious patterns slashed through the air. This was her modified version of the Black Mist spell, the illumination technique. The opening and ending motions were identical, the only difference was the alteration of the rhythmic inscriptions in the middle from darkness to light. Leveraging the Yang pattern's powerful affinity for light, Thea's modified spell unleashed in less than a second. Light itself is known for its swiftness, and Thea raised her hand and flung the luminous orb toward Rip Hunter, who was running in the lead. A ball of light instantly exploded around them, dissolving their once splendid formation. "What is that, a flashbang?" Thea didn't feel the need to explain. A swift, winding arrow shot out. They were hesitant to resort to drastic measures, and they couldn't resort to a drastic strike, relying instead on stunning and blinding abilities. Such an unexpected situation revealed the difference between ordinary heroes and superpowered heroes. Rip Hunter lived up to his name. In a truly bizarre display, he was caught in the web without a single grunt. His reflexive struggle only served to tighten the entanglement. Naturally, he couldn't withstand the chemical that could stun even Bane, and he was dead in less than 10 seconds. Heatwave, also charging fiercely, was in a similar situation, experiencing a close encounter with a web. As a professional arsonist, the sight of the web instantly evoked burn, burn, burn. Not only was he without a weapon, but even if he had, he wouldn't dare. He was still entangled in the web, so he turned to his partner, Captain Cold, for help. Captain Cold, who claimed that he could compete with the Flash with the physical fitness of an ordinary person, did have an amazing reaction. Perhaps his sunglasses also provided some protection, so he was less affected by the direct strong light. He vaguely saw Thea shooting the arrow and slowed down his pace a little, thus avoiding the fate of being caught in the net. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.